allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any comments and statements from the public? No Danny Marks today. Mrs. Tudelo,
He's not.
has Danny talked to you? Is he's going to be coming again, or?
He is. He's playing at a show.
I know he is. Okay, thank you.
We'll have to call his agent.
He does overbook, I think. Acknowledgement of the Westport Education Foundation grants. Is somebody presenting this, or?
No, just wanted you guys to have the list of the different grants that they have awarded.
Okay, so the list from Karen Powell of the Education Foundation grants that they have awarded thus far this year are at the elementary school, the 3rd and 4th grade musical, Annie Jr., the 4th grade math team, the Destination Imagination teams. There will be 4 teams, 1 2nd grade, 2 3rd grade, and 1 4th grade team. The middle school grants that they have awarded are Destination Imagination team for 6th grade, book clubs for 5th and 6th, and another book club for 7th and 8th. The Writers Guild math teams for grades 5, 6, and 7. They are helping the Music Boosters support the middle school musical, which is Honk, and they are have awarded to the science fair for the middle school as well. At the high school, they have pledged support to help fund the AP initiative if the Westport High School is approved for the grant from the Massachusetts Math and Science Initiative. The Westport Education Foundation will help pay for the remaining costs, including the transportation to the Saturday sessions. So those are the grant applications that they have received thus far, and I think they are still accepting grants, applications. Anything on this?
Thank you, Dylan.
Yeah, thank you very much to the hard work from the Ed Foundation and all of the support that they give to our extracurricular items. The building-based budget needs from the principals. If it's okay with everybody, I'd like to move the middle school first so that we can get the student presentation done as well. So Alec? Time.
I can only wear it once a year, so. And yes, it is a holiday time.
Yeah, your holiday time.
Stress that. Okay, the middle school's budget request that we had. Oops. Which one am I doing first?
No, go ahead. All right, we'll see.
I just wanted to go through with you the list that I had submitted to Dr. Gawley. This was a collaboration from the entire staff. We had a faculty meeting on the 2 Mondays ago. I want to say first Monday in December. I can't remember what day it was, but and I had sent them the information ahead of time what the faculty meeting was going to be about, looking for ideas to put forth in the budget, and I had given them along with some of the ideas that I had. I had a school council meeting just this afternoon where I also showed them this information and asked them to also give me some feedback. So I just want to go through and read through some of these items. The first one is called Jumpstart to Graduation, which is teaming up with Cheryl Turlow, and I give her the credit for she actually came up with the name and whatnot. But this is similar to the BCC program that the grant that we've been getting, sending 8th and 9th graders to BCC. This is expanding it down to 6th and 7th graders with, looking at the research, getting them, the students who are failing or in fear of failing ELA or math, getting them some substantial help in the summertime to bring up and close those gaps. second item is Career Dimensions. This is a web-based career exploration program. Our guidance counselors are doing a lot of work of going into the classrooms, and this is again linked to the college and career readiness that the high school here does a very good job at, and we are piggybacking along with what they're doing for 7th and 8th graders. So when our 7th and 8th graders get to the high school, they have a lot of information already. So this would be starting them off, very early in 7th and 8th grade, looking at careers, looking at what they would need to do for those careers. The third item, the $18,000, that is just reinstatement of the supply lines that we had cut at the end of the last school year. And that's in ELA, math, science, and school-wide instruction. The next item is the electronic scoring of the Gates McGinnity. That's given in 5th grade and 7th grade. And what we had asked the teachers to do this year, which was a very good exercise of having them, instead of sending it out and having them machine scored, we would score them ourselves. The teachers would score them, which gives them a lot of good insight into how the kids did. The downside to that is that it takes them a while to do it, but we also don't get the data in a way that we can manipulate it without putting it into an Excel spreadsheet ourselves and doing all that labor-intensive work that we would get readily from the company. And I want to say it was about $800 to $1,000 for them to score, give us the material on a usable format that we can manipulate across the entire 5th grade or across the entire 6th grade. What we have to do now is classroom. The classroom, look to see who's not making the grade, who we have to give some interventions to. This would allow us to do it readily. The next item are desks and chairs. This was something, I could add, this is for 2 classrooms, 10 classrooms, 15 classrooms. The chairs that are there were probably bought 10 to 15 years ago, but they were not really good quality, so they are really falling apart very quickly. And Mike Duart does a great job of re-welding these chairs and fixing them the best that you can, but then after a while you just can't fix them anymore. So that's what that line item is. The next one was a foreign language teacher to introduce a foreign language. I'm not saying which one it would be, but a foreign language into the middle school. That's something that they had quite a few years ago, but something to bring that back into the middle school. The next item is a science and technology teacher. That is really, and it's really put on there because it is something that we're going to have to do, if not next budget, the budget afterwards. And that's to pick up that 6th grade, now that we're totally departmentalized. One teacher cannot teach 6 periods of 6th grade science. So right now, because we have a small class size in 7th grade, a science teacher can teach 6th grade. And next year, when those kids are in 8th grade, that science teacher can still do that. But the year after, we're going to need a science teacher. So here was a proposal for a science teacher who would pick up that slack, but also possibly pick up some of that technology piece that we've lost. Very quickly, and the next one is a summer assessment institute. That is bringing in some of our needy regular ed kids who will be getting level, tier 2 RTI instruction for the year, bringing them in the summertime so we can assess them. We can assess where the needs are, where the strengths are, what we're going to have to put in place for the school year. Right now, we do that the month of September. This would allow us to bring some teachers in to do that kind of work. Next one is binders, and that could have been incorporated into the supply line. That's the language-based classrooms, now that they're in all 4 grade levels. Part of that program is if you're a student in that classroom, you'll have 4 binders. Thick, 1-inch binders that you will put all your paperwork into, and you keep that notebook up. It's an excellent way to get kids, and these children learn to become very organized in their note-taking, putting notes where they belong, looking at the notes, accessing the notes. It's a great skill to learn, and thankfully a lot of teachers in the middle school are doing this already, because now we're bringing it down to 5th and 6th grade. We've had it for 2 years. The school budget has absorbed the cost of buying the binders for the kids. It's, as you see, it's $1,200 worth of just binders. It's fairly expensive. The next one is an intervention teacher. That is someone who we would pinpoint for 6th and 5th grade to do some interventions, very much like we have people who are doing it in 7th, 8th grade, the Nancy Tripps, the Mary Lynches, the Betty Carams, who are doing that kind of work. That is to hire someone like that to do that work in 5th and 6th grade. And the last item are art room tables. There are 10 tables in the art room that have been broken, fixed again, broken, fixed, and fixed some more, and they are really on its last leg. So that's something that we're going to have to put money in to buy sooner or later.
Eric?
Alec, are these listed in priority?
That was my
Okay.
question.
Yes, I'm sorry. You know what,
Can you quickly prioritize these? Or would that, if you were to just look at, say, even just look at those and pick the top 4 or 5? Because that was my question.
the
as well.
top 4 or 5, the supply line, putting that monies back in, that goes into the classroom, a direct impact on the classroom. That's class sets of novels. That's work in science. That's math manipulatives. That's things that go right into the classroom that kids can use right away. I am very passionate about a foreign language program at the middle school. I think, when I was at the elementary school, I felt the same way. We should really be introducing these kids into foreign languages. The middle school has lost exploratory teachers over the years, and this was a program that was there. It gives a little bit more flexibility to the schedule, a little bit more flexibility to take kids out of work, to give them RTI instruction so they're not missing key things all the time. That is very important. The Summer Institute and the two career components, the summer programming and that career dimensions are very important.
Thank you. Anything else? John?
Alex, so that 18,000 in supplies that we cut, I mean, how are you guys
doing
making
without
out?
it?
I mean, how are you doing it this year without
Yeah,
it?
it's tough. Certain things were either not bought, certain things we held off on if we were going to purchase some certain books to replace them, classroom libraries, or if the 7th grade was reading the Pearl and all their copies are diminished. I'm sorry, 8th grade. We then would purchase them. This year we're saying, we'll buy it next year. We're putting things off. We're not buying some math manipulatives that, yes, we need. We're doing without perfectly fine, but they are a needed part. We have that new math teacher who could use some of those things.
So, I mean, we're calling it supplies, and, people are thinking pencils and paper
And that's the
books,
instructional,
too.
the instructional supplies, the school-wide instructional supplies, that's what that is. That was a cut in paper, pencils, things that parents now picked up the slack bringing in. And that's why the binders for the language-based program, why we buy them for them, because that would be an added-on thing that those parents would have to buy. And I know some parents are already buying it in certain classrooms, and it's tough, and they're already paying a lot of money for a lot of things. So
Alec, the language teacher. Are we talking about maybe one language class per grade? How would we?
the foreign language teacher,
Yeah.
yeah. I would envision, let's just say Spanish, having a Spanish teacher in where kids would be divided up like exploratory classes. One of those exploratory classes would be a foreign language. And that person would teach fifth through eighth grade foreign language.
So we'd have Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, Spanish 4.
Something like that. I'm not very well versed in what that foreign language protocol would look like, but just the introduction into it. I know the middle school had it before, so I know that is something that's viable. There are programs out there and teachers out there for middle school foreign languages, so.
Michael?
On the costs assigned to each of the categories, are these estimates that you've come up with, are they qualified? I see 45,000 for a teacher, and I'm just wondering if we've applied all the costs associated with a teacher in terms of benefits to that number.
That's the number that we came up with as an administrative team, what a new teacher would cost.
Okay.
So,
You've got to start somewhere, so
Yeah,
yeah. And the same with the other, you had some validation to those estimates?
the reinstatement of the supply line, that's basically what we had given up last year, more or less. The tables and chairs, that's basically what it would cost. I actually went through the exercise of 28 kids in a room, what's it gonna cost for desks and tables and chairs. The scoring of the Gates McGinnity, it's about $800 to $1,000. I gave that range. The art room tables, that's what it would cost. They're $284 each, times 10 gives you that number. The binders, I did that same thing, and the Summer Assessment Institute, I figured 3 teachers working $30 an hour times so much time, and I came up to that. So they're fairly accurate.
And getting back to the costs associated with the new teacher, is there also going to be some curriculum expenses that are not reflective here, or would that fit into the?
No, actually, you know what, I'm sorry, I didn't add that in. There would be. For someone to start up a foreign language program, we would have to put some curriculum needs into it. You're right.
And we had a program a few years ago. Would we be able to tap those
Probably,
resources?
if that's the language that we're going with, I'm sure there is that material there. Whatever it was that person used before is still there. In fact, it's still sitting in boxes in the classroom. I saw it just the other day when I walked through, so.
Okay. And do you have more to your presentation?
Not for the budget, no.
Okay. Anything else on the budget? Okay.
I'll go into the other part now?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to introduce Kimberly. It's Kimberly, 5th grader. She's going to walk you through Achieve 3000. What Achieve 3000 is, it's a a web-based program that assists children with their reading ability. It gives them a Lexile number, which is what the new park assessment that's coming down the pike is going to be reporting kids' reading levels at. This allows a child, and they all have their own account. They go on. There are questions for them to answer. There's some games for them to play. There's different things. They are scheduled into their schedule at the middle school to do this twice a week. And I've gone through classrooms when they're on it. All the kids are sitting there with the Chromebooks that Beth Lewis had supplied us with, and they're engaged. Some of them have their own headphones on, some of them have other headphones, and they're going through their programs, answering the questions. It has the ability to, children can send emails out within the Achieve 3000 network. I've gotten numerous emails from kids about a wide variety of things that they had questions for me about, and I try to answer as many as I can. It's really a good program. I thought maybe Kimberly could show you all how she goes and does it.
Very good.
Want to add anything?
We
Beth?
were thinking about expanding it to the point.
Yes.
If somebody's not feeling well tonight.
We are hoping to bring this up. So right now it's just 5th grade. It's 5th grade. We have a couple of licenses for some 6th graders and very few 7th graders. What I'd like to see happen is us continue to use this and buy it again for the 5th graders for next year, and And the sixth graders, presently fifth graders, will use it again next year. And again, schedule it into their schedule so that they are scheduled in to use it. What would have to go along with that is, right now we have these great Chromebooks that the kids use in the fifth grade wing. Sixth grade wing, we would have to purchase something for them also, a cart with Chromebooks on it, so they can use it. It happens right in the classrooms. The teacher gets the cart, brings it in, and they all use it. So it's, I've seen, when I look at some of the results, and I get the Lexile by number, and I have each child's name, and I can see the progress that some of them have made. I've seen some of the kids who have not made as much progress as we like. I look at, because it tells you how much time have they been using on it. And you can kind of see the kids who use it more, their Lexile scores are higher, and the kids who have not used it as much. The joy of this is that Kimberly can go home and use it at home. Her parents can see how she's doing on it. And it really is. I've seen a lot of good things out of it. And I'm just scratching the surface.
Actually, probably a question more for Beth. The license, are they more towards a certain number of kids per license, or is it per kid, per charge?
We pay per kid, but they allow us an overage, which I've taken advantage of. They haven't shut me quite off yet. I had to shave out a couple, but I think they're allowing us about 25% over. The fifth grade, we did a 2-year license, so we don't need to renew them this year, so you won't see that in the process.
So you can stagger the license to where it's instead of paying for 2 in 1 year, you can stagger them every other year, you'll be paying a license, then if it's a 2-year license, correct?
Yeah. One of the things that was important to myself and Ann and Alec and as it turns out, Tom, and we didn't want to start out on a program saying, well, we're going to try it just for this 1 year, and you put all this time and effort into making it work with your curriculum, because, as Alex said, they are doing it, they are doing it twice a week, but it's taking some science and social studies time. So what the teachers have ended up doing is letting the students do one current article, which Kimberly will show you here in a minute, and then assigning another article that's related to what they're doing in class. So that's sort of covering that standard in the content, reading in the content area, because it's all nonfiction. Most of it's National Geographic type based story, so kind of high quality.
No, I have one more question before you plunge back in there, sort of going on his question about the licensing. Until if or when we decide to implement this further, will that license roll with the fifth grade? So will it go up to sixth grade with the fifth?
No, the plan is we really wanted to get those fifth graders sort of off and running. So this grade, once they become sixth graders, unless we buy a sixth grade license, they won't continue. But the incoming fifth graders will, which will be that'll be some interesting data because they've started it now in fourth grade. So those kids will get 2 years. But we're really seeing that these kids are struggling with that nonfiction reading as much as in other tests where they are reading some, kind of fun fantasy fiction that you don't really have to think about. They do struggle with the nonfiction, and we've seen that in several different assessments.
And I would think, as a non-educator's point of view, the new testing that's coming down the pipe, which is going to be computer-based, if you have a child that's never done anything on a computer
Correct.
before, and they sit down and take a test, it's a little bit culture shock, whereas I would think these kids will just be more comfortable having done these programs on a consistent basis so that when they sit down to test.
And with that in mind, keeping in mind, we really like the product, regardless of its relationship with Park and all of that. I think we would have been looking at this product because of what it is, and it's kind of specialized in its field. But they are working with the Park. What you're going to see today, I think the students will be seeing something very similar on their ELA test once in 2014.
Tony?
My son is in the 4th grade and he's doing that, and believe it or not, we really don't even have to ask him too many times to go, to go on the site and read one of the stories. He usually does it in the morning. He'll check the score at night. They keep track
Yes,
of the score.
for those students that are just a little competitive, there's a few things built in.
Last night he was 29 points from the top of his class.
Yeah.
This morning he was like
Yeah.
80 points. I told him, I said, well, obviously there was other kids thinking the same thing, but so it gets them.
Very good.
They get excited about doing it, and a lot of times I get up and he's downstairs in the office on his own, and he's doing this. So
Yeah.
That's good.
Alex got the numbers there, but the number of students that we have working on this off hours is pretty impressive for something that really has just been rolled out system-wide. You heard about this last year because we did pilot it with a small group, but I just asked Kimberly, I said, would this be good if you got to do this again next year? And she's okay with that. So how about if we have
Very
Kimberly
good.
show you a couple of things? I promised her that I would give her questions and she could answer. So come on up. Kimberly's already logged in. The link was right off of the middle school website. And this is what it looks like when she logs in. So from a teacher's perspective, as you're scanning the student screens in the room, see the thermometer that's yellow over there? That means she's done 26 activities already that she's gotten at least 75% or more on, which is the goal we talked to the students about. So Kimberly's going to show you where the activities are in a second. But Kimberly, what do you do first thing after you log in? If it's just a normal, you're going to do the article of the day.
I answer the poll question.
Answer the poll question. So she's been thinking hard about this one as she's been sitting over there, because this one's a little tougher than most, huh? All right, so what did you decide?
Discreet.
Okay, so go ahead and show them what you do. So she hasn't done this one yet today. Okay, so she gets some feedback that she's finished that, so then what do you do?
Then I go to my email.
Go to your email. Okay. And then it just sort of reiterates what the poll asked her to do. And normally you would do what here? What does your teacher ask you to do?
Reply to why we did agreed or disagreed.
Right, so she has to kind of defend that. We're going to skip that for the moment, okay? And so after she replies, then you do what?
Go to the article.
Go to the article. So show them how you get to the article. So before she starts the article, and she gets to see vocabulary that might be new to her, and depending upon the reading level, this is going to look different because it is leveled based on a assessment that she took a few months back. She can hear it, she can play it, and it's not her only opportunity. So we're just going to skip right over that piece for the moment. And here's the article. So basically, then what do you do?
I go through and read it.
You go through and read it. So some articles are longer than others. Kimberly's a good reader, so she's got quite a bit here. You can see that the dictionary is down the bottom. She also has the opportunity to take notes under each paragraph if she wants. So as the kids, and we haven't really rolled this out too much. You haven't started doing that too much yet, right?
No, but it's an option.
It's an option, yeah. But that helps with the thought question later on. So once you read the article, then what do you do?
I go to the activity.
Okay, go ahead. So the activity, you'll see that they're all different kinds of things. We'll kind of look at a couple of these questions. She's not going to be responsible for knowing the answers because she hasn't read yet. So here, she has to find the main idea. And this is kind of graphical. We're seeing this a lot with the up-and-coming state tests. So once she decides what her answer would be, then you
I click submit.
click submit. So we're going to show you one that's already done so that she doesn't want to lose any points. So in the works, which one did we decide? The shoes? So on the shoes, her activity questions are already done here. So she gets feedback right away when she's done about how she did. So how do you think you did on this one?
I think I did good.
You think you did well? Okay. So down the bottom here, it says that she got 88%. So when you saw the thermometer, that means she's at least scoring 75% or better on the first try. And so what do you think you might have had to do a little bit differently with number 6, now that you see? What should you have done?
I thought I should have gone back into the article.
Right. That's the biggest thing, going back in the article to really look at what that information is. So once they get the feedback, they get to decide if they still agree or disagree, if their answer changed on the poll. And then there's a thought question, and this is kind of like a short answer, and this is where Kimberly hasn't quite finished, but this is pretty typical. She gets the question, and then there's some hints there.
Yeah.
Some hints. So this is the expectation for Kimberly. So they really are giving her some good writing hints in there. Once she submits that, her teacher she sees it. Does your teacher give you some feedback? Sometimes?
Yes.
Yes. So. And then there's different, you can see that there's poll results, there's always one math question. How do you do on the math questions?
I usually get them right.
You usually get them right. Do you have any questions for Kimberly? Ask her all the hard ones. What's your favorite article, Ben, so far?
One about volcanoes and social study. I mean science.
Science.
Kimberly, how many nights a week do you do this? Do you log in?
Do you log in at home?
Sometimes.
Kimberly, what do you think that this does for you? What does this teach you? Does it help you? How?
Yeah, I think it helps me, and I learn new things every week.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that I get more questions right.
So you're learning as you go along.
Yeah.
And how do you like the stories? Are they interesting stories? Are they things that you would read on your own?
Yeah.
They are. Can your parents do this? I bet not, huh? I bet you're more tech savvy, huh? Yeah, I'm pretty impressed at what you guys as a generation can do on the computer, I'll tell you that. Thank you for showing. Does anybody have any questions for Kimberly?
And just show,
All right.
show them
No,
how you
those
can
are
see
excellent.
who's in
For
there.
a second.
Where is that? Do you hang out in that? Check that out?
Yeah.
I know. This is a little bit different than we used to. All right, so here's where the competitive piece comes in. There's always somebody on the scoreboard. So for yesterday, we see what class is ahead and who the students are. That I don't see any grade 4s there. Sorry there, Mr. Viveris.
Yeah, well, that's what we were looking at this morning.
So one of the things we're actually meeting with the teachers tomorrow to make some classroom incentives to kind of keep the kids interested. Would that be fun? Do you guys talk trash to the classes? No.
No.
Okay. Hey, are we all set with Kimberly? She's got homework to do.
That's
Great job.
Kimberly, thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you for coming.
You're watched by millions of people tonight.
Anything else on this?
Any other questions for me?
No, good job.
Thank you.
Matt?
want to mention that we had some technical difficulties tonight. I did have I actually had a student doing a guided reading and videotaped it, and I was very excited. She has made tremendous progress since she's begun, and she's actually at a level 8 now, so she's right at grade level where we would expect her. And I just wanted to kind of show that to you all, because that is our big initiative this year, early literacy. One of the things I did do was put together packets that all the parents got last week at parent-teacher conferences. So one of the packets was just for kindergarten, and the other packet was just for preschool. And I kind of took that time to kind of corner the parents and talk to them about kindergarten and preschool literacy and what the expectations were. We also went over the misconception of what an A, B, and a C level would look like. So just to let you know, and I have one for each of you because I'm sure that's what you want. So an A level book is my main thing of what I wanted to tell them. The big picture was that when you go to buy a book, as you all go to buy books for your children or go to the library and you see that little 1 in the corner, that 1 is probably an H level book. So I wanted parents to make informed decisions on what kind, especially at this time of year when you're giving books for Christmas. And that's what I suggest, books for Christmas. No toys, just books. So
How do your boys feel about that?
they're thrilled. They always know what's from mommy. An A-level book is not necessarily a 1, so that to teach the parents the difference between independent reading and instructional reading, to have them be successful at home so that they grow up with that foundational literacy, that love for learning. So I put that together, and luckily enough, you each get one. I'll give that to you. There's one for kindergarten and one for preschool, but just so that you see what I gave to everyone. There's also a list in there that correlates with the common books that you find at the library, the Get Ready to Read, and all the ones that everyone goes and buys. And one of the parents actually said, I'm so glad you did this because I bought her all 1s because I figured she's in kindergarten, it's a 1. And then she looked at what an A, a B, and a C are, and she said, no, it's going to be too hard for her. So we talked about some different strategies that she could use, like picking out all the sight words and having her read those. So that was something that we did with early literacy as the focus. So again, I apologize for not having my student, who I'm very proud of, as with all of them. But just to get to the items on my budget, the needs-based budget exercise, there were some revised items, and I'll get to those in a minute, but I did take the collaboration with the staff on December 3rd. Unfortunately, I didn't meet with the school council about this because after we got the information was after I had my school council for November, or it was the group school council. Just going over it real quick, the planning and assessment, there is a new assessment coming down the pike that is going to be, you'll be hearing about a lot over the next 4 years. It's called the MKEA, and it is it's going to be a mandate. So it might be the first time you're hearing about it. It's the Massachusetts Kindergarten Entry Assessment, and it is quite lengthy. And for those of you that had students in preschool within the past 3 or 4 years, I don't know if you remember the creative curriculum reports that I know that you dealt with, Mr. Larrabee at Head Start, and I know that you dealt with when you had your son in preschool. There were pages and pages and lots of information to gather. That's exactly what it is, in a nutshell. So we are going to have to prepare for that because it's something that we really have to kind of embrace, and otherwise we're going to have some issues because they're going to probably tie funding for full-day kindergarten to it. So we're trying to anticipate trying to get on the bandwagon. They're starting cohort 2 next year, and if you go with cohort 2, they'll pay for all the PD and the actual funding per student. It costs about $10 per student to even do this, so they'll pay for that from the state. So we're trying to jump on the bandwagon for that. So considering this new MKEA is approaching, we need to streamline the assessments that are in place because it is not an assessment, it is a portfolio. So you have to create the assessments that you therefore grade that go into the child's portfolio. They don't give you assessments. And there's over 1,000 objectives. And you have to finish it within the first 6 to 8 weeks and send the data to the state. So I put in there that what the cost would be. And again, these are just estimates. Before and after school care, that's something that we have been discussing, and I did put together a proposal for that. So ready anytime you need us to discuss that. A 6th kindergarten teacher. I did get the numbers from our census. And if you want to pass that down. We just received them, so I do apologize for them not being as part of your packet, but. And of course, we're not sure of the potential growth in housing in Westport even my own neighborhood, there's many houses going up. So I'm just guesstimating here. But we have the next year's census versus the anticipated, and we would really like to go back to 6 teachers. We want to go back to where we have been in the past, okay? Same thing with preschool, go back to 3. It is a state law that we cannot go over 25 students in a classroom average. So just to give you the heads up on that. So I estimated the same thing as Mr. Simonello did previously.
Can you just repeat what you just said?
Sure.
It is a state law of what?
25 students in a kindergarten class average.
Average, okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. I thought that you said average at the end of that, but I...
That's okay. It's 603 CMR 8, and its class size for kindergartners shall not exceed an average of 25.
Okay.
So, and also a full-time interventionist. Right now we have a part-time reading intervention specialist that gets paid through Title I grant funding, and we'd like that to be full-time, especially given the many at-risk students that are coming in. We're finding we have more and more students that are coming in at risk than ever before. We do what's called a Brigance screening at the end of preschool, and that tells us where our students are. Those Brigance scores have been rising, they've been falling. The numbers of falling students have risen. So 3 years ago, we had about 20% of students that were at warning, at risk level, okay, which is 65 and below. This year, we had 30% of our students were at risk. Okay, so that's huge. So one of the things that's not on here is that we'd like to do a K jump start for those students that are identified as being at warning or at risk. We'd like to offer them a program in the summer, intensive kindergarten type services, to get them jump started to where they need to be for K, because they don't all come in. Like the other grades, they don't all come in with preschool. Some of them have stayed home for 5 years. So we really need to get them going. And since we can't obviously mandate preschool, it's not mandated, we'd like to give them something so that they're on par with the rest of the students that are in their K population. Because obviously there are some that they've never picked up a pencil. And there are some that can read at a C level. So it is such a huge disparity between the levels that we'd like to give those kids some intensive services over the summer so that they're better suited, and because that's where it all starts.
So we do know which kids attended
Yes.
our preschool or another.
Yes.
I mean, do we see that trending down? Is it an economical thing?
Yes. What do you mean trending down?
Less kids in are we getting less kids that have attended preschool?
The only reason we're getting less kids in preschool is because we only have 2 teachers.
Any preschool, I think.
Yeah, any
Oh.
preschool. I mean, any preschool.
Our numbers have been we're maxed out in all of our classes except for 1.
But if you were to take 100 students 2 years ago, regardless of what preschool they went to,
That is
are
I
we
understand.
seeing students just not
In
go
general.
to preschool?
Yeah.
I agree with you. In general, I would assume that people are going to preschool less and less because they can't afford it, and maybe I don't know for sure. But we're trying to do some outreaches, as we always do, with the preschools in the area, and have offered them to come to our professional development, which is one of the things that Ms. Harrington does, is she reaches out to those preschools and has them come to our professional development. She goes and tests the kids. She gives them education, but they're not mandated to follow the things that we're mandated to follow. So it's very difficult, and they won't necessarily get a sub for their teacher because that costs money. So just to give you.
And we know how our preschoolers do.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We have a bell curve like everybody else, but yeah, we definitely know how our preschool is doing, definitely. I mean, it's few and far between, definitely. Because we have to follow the Common Core, and we have curriculum, and we have highly qualified teachers, and, you know, things of that nature. So along with that full-time interventionist, because we don't have anyone right now doing full-time intervention. We have a part-time intervention person, but she only takes the Title I kids. So if you don't make that Title I cut, she can't take you. So we need someone that can help with the intervention for all those kids. Aside from lowering the class sizes at an age where they're starting to learn how to read, so it's a disadvantage to them all across the board. You have towns that are neighboring that won't go over 20 in early childhood. So I think it's something that we need to look at. So the paraprofessional would go along with that, so she can do the RTI for the tier 2s, the tier 3s that are at the low end, and obviously a third preschool teacher. And that's for the sheer fact that we can. Some parents don't want 3 full days or 2 full days or 2 half days. They want different offerings. For the most part, and Dr. Colley, you can address this, the preschool program is, I don't want to say, is it self-sustaining, would you say, or is it?
It pays for about a little 3/4 of it.
3/4. So it is something that brings in money, and it does serve a purpose in educating the children in our community who would not normally be able to go to a full-time preschool or something of that nature. So that might be another, I want to say, answer to the problems of, you know, preschool and how we can look at doing that. I'd be more than happy to do that. The 3 different things that are not on the amendments are technology, iPads, because this MKEA assessment, it requires a great deal of assessment time on the part of the teachers, and they have to have some means of technology in order to do the assessment. And one of the things that these 2 assessment tools have are an iPad app that otherwise it just isn't feasible to do during classroom time. The math line, as the other principals had to take out certain lines from their budget, we had to take out our math line last year. I believe it was $4,000. So obviously we need to put that back in.
You said math?
Math, I'm sorry. Math curriculum materials, and the K Jumpstart type program. And again, it's an intensive program. It would not be a camp. It would be specifically, because camps are normally somewhat self-sustaining again, the Jumpstart program would be something that is intensive just for the kiddos that we're identifying once we do the Brigance screenings in May or June.
Same question as Alec.
Sure.
Are these prioritized?
No, they are not prioritized.
What would you put at the top of your list?
The 6th teacher.
Okay. Anything else? Michael?
Thank you for the thorough analysis of your needs. I believe you're starting to really build a foundation for analyzing a few things. One is the needs based on current student learning, but also you mentioned changes, whether it be from pushed through legislation, state requirements, or this MKEA, and all those affect how dollars are spent.
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting down the right path. I would imagine maybe the next step or the step after will become a meeting of the minds where we look at how much we have to spend and, in fact, balance this list of high priority needs with perhaps some reallocation of where we're spending money currently. So I share that with you as well as all the presentations, that if in fact these are the highest priority,
Mm-hmm.
but we start to total up the dollars off these lists, similar to as we go through our Christmas shopping list, where are we going to put our resources? And I think that becomes further down the process, and we look forward to input on that as well. But I'm very impressed with your identifying areas that we could make some investments and improve our learning in the classroom. So thank you.
Tony.
Julie, The iPads and the Jumpstart programs, do you have a cost?
I don't have a cost on the iPads. But again, that would depend on
How
how
many
many
are we looking
teachers. We're just talking about 5 or 6.
For the teachers?
For the teachers, because they need to go around, and obviously that can be something that they use in the everyday classroom. The Jumpstart program, it's just something that we've kind of recently talked about, the teachers and I, and we really feel that would be extremely beneficial. I can certainly run the numbers for that as well.
Anything else?
But that would be a stipend, this is a summer program?
Right, that would be a stipend.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Elementary? Is she here? Chris?
That's Mrs. Stockwitz, isn't it?
Hello.
Hello.
And-
Mrs. Gaston had a prior commitment tonight, so.
Since Julie was talking about guided reading, do you want to do a plug for your guided reading thing in January?
Absolutely.
Might as well. So just to let people know that they can get training on teaching their kids the guided reading.
Sure, I'm glad to do that.
Go for it.
Okay. We were lucky enough to be able to find a volunteer consultant that is going to be able to come in, and we're going to conduct a guided reading evening where we're actually going to train parent volunteers to come in and teach them how guided reading is conducted in the classroom. We're doing this for several reasons. One reason, naturally, is because I think it's important for parents to really see exactly what is guided reading, that it is not the 3 groups like some of us might remember, or the 4 groups or the 5 groups, the buzzards, the bluebirds, and the cardinals, but it really is more targeted instruction. So it's one way for us to be able to get the parents on board, but it's also a way for us to be able to have the parents be able to be helpers in the classroom. So that way it would relieve the teacher from being able to, trying to cut herself up into so many different slices and being able to really address all of the needs of all of the students. The one criteria that we do have, though, is that we are asking parents to come in and to volunteer and to do that, but not necessarily in their own child's classroom. So that's the one little glitch. And I think the reason that we're doing that is simply, I think you can understand, sometimes some of that parochialism that happens when a parent is in the classroom, if we're going to ask them to instruct, it's a little hard, and I know for myself, as a parent, very hard sometimes to go into the classroom if it's your child's classroom and really not be very focused on what he or she are doing. And I mean, that's only natural. So, but we're hoping that it's going to be January 12th. It's going to be held at the West, and we are going to be sending home information. I know that we did talk about it at open house initially, and so we are able to now get it up and running. So we're really excited about it and hoping that from there we will do what we call a train the trainer type of a program where some of those parents, once they kind of get very familiar with it, then they're going to be able to train other parents. So we should have a whole network of people that are training guided reading that are going to be able to come in and really help out the kids and be able to work with them.
And this wouldn't necessarily just be open for parents. It could be grandparents or
Can be.
community members.
Absolutely.
That maybe retired teachers that want to
Absolutely.
volunteer some time and
Right.
come in and do it's 2 hours on that night.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
yeah. So they should email Tom Gastal at the elementary school, correct?
Absolutely. They can email Tom at the elementary school if they're interested. One of our goals is possibly to, after we get some of the newer volunteers on board, is to contact Council on Aging and
Great.
see if they would be willing to come in and not only to do guided reading, but even just to kind of be available in the classroom. They can do flashcards. They can, sometimes kids just need a little bit of TLC just to be able to listen to a child read. So there's all kinds of ways that we're going to be able to utilize these volunteers.
Great, thank you. I
Do they have
figured
to
since you
volunteer then?
mentioned the guided reading, I might as well let you mention that too.
No, I'm
So-
glad you brought it up. That's
Good.
excellent.
Thank
Great.
you. All right, on to budget.
All right. Well, for budget, I have here a copy of our latest I know you have one in your packet, but just these include the projected figures.
She's coming, so I'm just putting it here.
Thanks, bud.
So first, I just want to point out that all of the recommendations that are on the sheet really were, as you can see, they are divided into administrative recommendations, teacher recommendations, and then school council recommendations. I will really focus on the administrative recommendations. However, we felt it was really important to put the teacher recommendations and school council recommendations because it does show a collaborative effort that we really did try to put together a budget including everyone's concerns, everyone's needs. We even have a wish list, and as you can see, there are some of the things in the administrative recommendations that certainly do line up with the teacher recommendations, which also line up with the school council recommendations. So I'll just focus on the administrative recommendations. If you look at the bottom, we have the projected enrollment for what next year will be for grade 1, 2, 3, and 4. So with that, we are asking for 6 classes for grade 1, and then because our current grade 1 is kind of like a bubble class, we will be asking for 7 classes for grade 2. We are also asking for 6 third grades and 6 fourth grades. That would be an increase. Right now we have 5 third grades. It just seems every year we sort of cut back on grade 3, and then over the summer, historically, that's where a lot of our numbers come in. So it looks really good on paper when everyone goes in June, and by the time we're ready to come back in August or September, all of those third grade classes, for some reason, they just increase. So last year we thought we were going to have maybe 20 to 21 in third grade, and now we're back up to like 24 and 25. So technically what this is really looking at is what we lost before so many of the budget cuts in the last few years. We're really asking to get back what we lost. We also are asking for an additional full-time special educator. Right now we have 3. There is not one for first grade. The model that we're using for first grade, which was kind of a cost-cutting measure for us, was for us to have duly certified teachers in first grade. We have 3 duly certified teachers, meaning that they are certified in both regular education and special education. But again, that's one teacher, and the diverse needs of first graders, with especially children who are not necessarily identified yet as requiring special education because they're just starting out and the gaps are still very, very small. But we don't have someone that can just service just the first graders. It's someone, if they are identified, they're serviced by their classroom teacher, which is the exact same as what she's doing with all the other students in the classroom. So we would like to go back to having 4 special educators. In addition to that, our grade 3 numbers going into grade 4, our special education numbers, children that are identified on IEPs, is a high number. This year we have 1 special ed teacher that is part-time between 2nd grade and 3rd grade, and she's going back and forth. It's not really as effective as what it could be if we just had 1 person that was servicing 2nd grade and 1 person that was servicing 3rd grade. We have, as I said, a large number, so we would like to have a part-time special ed teacher going into next year for 4th grade. 4th grade being a really difficult year academically. We're just looking at possibly being able to give a little bit more support to the students, so it would be really 1.5 special ed teachers at grade 4. Title I, we'd like to go back to a full-time library media teacher. We're currently at 0.5. Again, another cost-cutting measure that we did for last year's budget. But the library in an elementary school should be the center of literacy in an elementary school. And what should it be? It should be the media center. And so for students to be able to not only go and visit the library and take out books, but just be able to go in and access the computers, the magazines, the multimedia programs that we have, all of the different types of equipment. And we can't do that because we only have someone in there part-time, so it's very difficult. And in addition to that, she is teaching first and second grade because of the large numbers, and we only have 3 specialists. Just on paper, very difficult to accommodate all of the teachers' prep times and allow for those teachers to have prep time in the afternoon with the larger numbers, especially with first grade. We really do need to have a full-time librarian. Literacy coach for 3rd and 4th grade. We are looking at more of focusing Title I services really in the 1st and 2nd grade, which is where they really are the most beneficial. And because so many of the students in Title I, in order to really access Title I, a lot of times they have to be pulled out. They have to miss a subject. They have to miss science and social studies is really where we do end up pulling them from, so they're not missing their math instruction and their ELA instruction. But again, you're taking them out of something. And a literacy coach would be someone that could support the teachers, would be allowed to kind of really support the teachers and help the teachers to come up with more specific types of literacy plans so that we could incorporate reading with science and social studies. So it would not just be science, social studies, reading science, reading social studies, because reading science and social studies really is reading. Common planning time, something that the teachers have been asking for at the elementary school forever. Even when I was started, and that's a long time ago, we have never had common planning time. Common planning time is simply a time to be able to sit with your grade level colleagues and be able to plan out your lessons, discuss student growth, discuss student achievement, discuss those students that are having difficulty, share the ideas of the things that work, the things that don't work. Elementary teaching is so different than any of the others simply because they're in a room all day with those students. They really and truly do not get a chance to really collaborate together. And this would certainly go a long way in being able to improve instruction and also to support the curriculum. So then, in return to the budget, we had in 12-13 this year's budget, we did cut out principal supplies, instructional supplies, school-wide supplies, reading supplies, and math supplies. So we would like to put those all back in, so that really, again, that's just returning to the to what we had prior to the budget cuts that we had to make last year. And then if you just want to look over teacher recommendations and school council recommendations, if you have any questions about that, I'd be glad to answer those, or if you have any questions about the administrative recommendations.
How much time do the teachers spend now on common planning time?
Well, they get a 40-minute prep time, okay? On paper, it's 40 minutes. Technically, that means in elementary school, you bring the children to specialists, and you pick them up from specialists. So you need to, so you walk them back and forth. So there's a little bit of time off of that. On paper, by contract, it's 40 minutes. Probably in reality, it's probably more like 30 minutes. The way the schedule goes, we usually try to have 3 people from the grade level share a common prep so the 3 classes have specialists at the same time, and then we have 3 other people share specialists at the same time. We try to do that as much as possible, but there's 6 teachers. I will be honest, most of the teachers on their own time voluntarily do their own collaboration and planning time after school or before school. Some teachers are there as early as 6:30, 6:45 in the morning, and some of them are there until as late as 5:30, 5:45 at night, because that they know that it means it really does support instruction so much.
Can you just, I'm looking quickly at these, but can you just go over which one of these are sort of overlaps? Because, I see obviously more time for common planning, teacher recommendations, as well as administrative recommendations. But are any of these in a teacher's recommendation sort of the same as what the administration is recommending, but worded differently?
Not really, because if you look at, yes, the first three, the time for common plan, the teachers are asking for less time on professional development in order to be able to do that collaboration with each other. So
Okay.
that's different. And then also, they're asking for 4 reading specialists, 1 at each grade level. Currently, right now, we have 2, and we have 2.5. We have 2 full-time and 1 part-time. The teachers would like to have 1 reading specialist at each grade level, so that is definitely something that's different. The Chromebooks for the classrooms would be to allow to have computers in the classroom. A lot of the teachers have started an initiative this year called Daily 5, and Daily 5 is really it's really a center-based type of learning, and it does require technology. It's read to learn. It's also being able to do certain kinds of vocabulary activities, letter activities, that type of thing, on the computer. And it's so students are independent working, sometimes with a volunteer in there, sometimes with a para, but it does require more than the 1 computer that is really right now. There's 1 computer that's able to be student accessed. The other computer that's in most of the classrooms is really the teacher computer, because it's the one that's connected to the smart board. So you can't be teaching at the smart board with 1 computer, and then you have maybe a small group of like 5, but then you have 15 others that really could use the access to technology as well.
Caroline?
I just have a question. The first item on both, one says 45,000 and the other says 90, but it's the same amount of teachers, if I'm reading this correctly. The teacher's recommendation is the cost, it has it at 90, administration has it at 45, but it's 6, and 6, and then 7 in grade 2. So was that just a typo? Is it the 90? Is it the 45?
It's 2 teachers, could be 90.
Well,
Right now, you got 5 teachers in grade 5.
right.
So
No, 5
to
teachers
bring them
in
up to
grade.
6 plus 1 and 7, that would be 1 teacher, which would be the 45.
Right, yeah,
So it's probably
It's the 45, the 90
It
is
probably
incorrect?
is,
Okay.
yeah. You know what, to
Just-
be honest with you, I apologize for
No,
that.
that's fine.
Eric?
Down the bottom, teacher recommendations, I know we're not really concentrating on them too much, but no new programs. What's that about?
Well, the math program, which is there's a definite learning curve. And again, this was more or less, this wasn't necessarily a collaborative list of teacher recommendations. It was more or less at a faculty meeting to just kind of share out. And so the wish list is no new programs. Basically, it's because there is such a learning curve on new programs, and so the teacher is learning the program while he or she teaches the program. However, with that said, we do have to have programs that are up and aligned with Common Core. And so I believe that may have been a reference to the fact that we are looking, and you have approved, and we're looking into a new reading, writing program. So I think the teachers were just like, whoa, but on the other hand, the current Scott Forsman that we are using in the elementary school is 12 years old. So it's not even close to being aligned with Common Core. So I think it's, a little bit of a difference of opinion there.
Anything else, Michael?
Yeah, I'll start with my comment on new programs. I agree with what you're saying. It's a 12-year-old program. We've had an opportunity to review the results of those 12 years of education through our administrative staff, with input from the teachers, have made decisions on spending in areas that we think will make improvement. Apparently, there's some issues with making that transition. It may have to do with freeing up some time for appropriate training on it.
Correct.
But we look forward to everyone embracing these decisions and going forward. There's another concept I want to share with you as well as the other schools. This is a great foundation for our budgetary process. I did hear a few comments about due to the effects of last year's budget cuts. last year's budget cuts were difficult process for us to go through.
Right.
We're starting this year with a collaborative approach, following the systems that the superintendent has put in place and trying to get started earlier. In no way do we want to give an impression that the budget crisis is over. We're not sending out a message that tell us what else you need. We appreciate identifying the areas where we perhaps should be spending our resources. The resources are not going up in any great way. Later in today's meeting, you'll hear about, I believe, 9C cuts. There are projections for next year that are better than other years, but not a quick rebound. And I think we all know that.
We do.
I've shared with Dr. Colley just today an article that I think will be helpful for everyone throughout both the administration level as well as even the teachers to recognize the opportunity we have ahead of us. And the article's titled Transformation or Decline, Using Tough Times to Create Higher Performing Schools. So, we're in a situation that budget crisis has put us in and evaluating everything. So I guess my point is, thank you for this. The next step, as I mentioned to the prior principal, the next step is to start to weigh and balance the best approach. So I like the list, all the things. I'd love to say yes to all of it, and we know that's not going to happen.
We know that, but you go for pie in the sky.
We look forward to future
So that's
meetings
exactly what
and-
we did. We said, we're going to go for that. The other thing I wanted to just point out tonight is an initiative that we are very much involved with this year at the elementary school, and that would be the RTI, response to intervention. So I just have something, just briefly, I will just go over this. This is just something that, for your own reading, it's a parent handout that we used, and actually I passed it out to the teachers too. And this is a brochure that goes home with some of the students, and it explains about what RTI is, okay, and how it is used in the school. So primarily, I'm really going to just focus on just the brochure. What is RTI? In previous meetings, I know myself and Mr. Gastol have talked a little bit about how we really needed to firm up our process of how we identify students who are at risk much earlier than what we have been doing in the past. This year, we have become very vigilant about that. We have a process in place. We have an RTI team, which consists of an administrator, a teacher, a special ed teacher, the school adjustment counselor, the school psychologist. And RTI is not necessarily just academics. You can also bring forth any type of issues that children may have with social emotional adjustments, some behavioral adjustments. So it's a way of us being able to identify students early when they are first presenting different types of learning behaviors, different types of learning difficulties, and then from there we are able to then take interventions and be able to apply those interventions back in the classroom. So the teacher will come to the RTI team with a referral and talk about a little bit about what's going on with that particular student, and then we give them some ideas and some interventions in different ways that they are able to now do a little bit more directed instruction, a little bit more targeted instruction. And certainly the whole idea of it is to close the gaps early so that when a child is identified as having difficulty, we are able to support that through tiered instruction. Tier 1 is whole group, everyone is in Tier 1. Tier 2 is not necessarily Title I or a pullout. A teacher can actually do Tier 2 instruction herself or himself right in the classroom. It's just differentiating that instruction, becoming more involved with looking at students, looking at learning styles, looking at learning behaviors, and being able to tailor their curriculum and their delivery of instruction so that all students' needs are being met. So it's not necessarily, certainly not a one-size-fits-all. So we are in the process. We as I said, we meet twice a month. It's really, I think it's been beneficial. The teachers have really embraced it. I think that we're seeing lots of really good data that's coming back to us. And so hopefully that we will just continue along in this process. And of course the goal is by the time they do get into 3rd and 4th grade that we're not identifying students with special ed or special needs, and we're not looking for students who by now they're in 4th grade and they're reading 2 to 2.5 years below grade level. This way they're identified early when the gaps are smaller, and that way we're able to hopefully be able to intervene and be able to close those gaps so that the student is able to learn at the same pace as their age mates. So I just wanted to highlight that tonight as well. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Tudelo. We already did it. With him, so we did that first. Hello.
We're going to start highlighting our initiative, and I've asked Mrs. Antonelli to do that because she's done all of the work associated with that initiative.
Good evening. As you know, we have been spending a lot of time at Westport High School in our self-study for the NIAS visit, which will be happening in the spring. In one of the self-study committees, school culture and leadership, one of the indicators that this visiting team will be looking at is whether or not the school has an advisory program for students. And actually, we felt that because in itself, Westport High School is a small learning community because we're a small high school, we really do have, one of the benefits of our school is that every student in the school really is known by most of the adults in the building. However, the indicator does state that there is a formal ongoing program through which each student has an adult in the school, in addition to their school counselor, who knows the student well and assists the student in achieving the school's 21st century learning expectations. So, although we certainly do know our students well, we don't have a formal program. So, we started to look at what that would, how we could implement this in a meaningful way, not something where the kids say, oh boy, we get to go just sit in a class. So, Mrs. Tudelo actually looked at a program called School Connect, and then in the spring and during our professional development right at the end of the school year, I met with teachers, and they were representative of grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. And we really identified the areas that we felt would best help students to kind of be on track, to remember, and I think all of us who are either educators or parents know that there are many times introducing a new voice, students really listen to what we're saying. And so kids need to hear a message sometime from a new voice in a new atmosphere outside of their classroom to just help them understand that there are certain good practices in transition as they move through the high school experience. So what we did was develop a unit for each grade level, and within that unit there would be one lesson a month that would help students understand what practices will enable them to become successful students. So what I have done is taken the topics at the top of each one of these categories for grades. I have the transfer of knowledge, because we followed the Understanding by Design unit that we have adopted as a district for our units of instruction. And we have the transfer of knowledge for grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then listed under that, each number represents a month and what each grade level students will be doing during that month. So I just wanted to give you a copy. And then once we decided on the topics over the summer, I put together a binder for every teacher in the building with the complete lesson for each one of those months, so that this didn't become a burden for our teachers in additional prep, so that, for instance, tomorrow morning we will have our month of December advisory meeting, and each one of those teachers will just take that unit out, and that will be what they will be. Every ninth grade student will be receiving the same lesson. For instance, if you look at number 3 under grade 9, it says, check your academitude, which is the kids take a little survey. And for instance, one of the academitude questions is, you're going to have a big math test, and you're really not feeling confident about the material. What would be the way you will approach this? And one choice would be get together with a friend and go over some of the material. One would be speak to the teacher and see if there's a time that you could get some extra help. Another would be give up because you know you're not going to do that well. So then once the kids have answered those questions, they all talk about what would be the best way to approach that, getting ready for that test. So there's some really simple best practices for ninth graders, and then as you can see, they're tailored to each grade. I think it's important to note that every student at Westport High School began the year developing their SMART goals, which are the one aspect of school that they are going to focus in on, just as every teacher under the new evaluation system has identified their professional goals. All of them have the same target, and most of the teachers have shared with the students that the professionals have goals. This idea of SMART goals actually came from the business community and now have been utilized. And I have, if you want a definition of what they are, I also have that handout. If you want to develop your goals. Could you just pass those around?
These are all the same. Okay.
I'll just
Goals good. I have the other. We haven't talked about that yet.
Thank you.
I love your reflection as a ninth grader, reflection and letter to yourself as a senior.
Yes, and the reflect on how your ninth grade has been and write a letter to yourself as a 12th grader, kind of predicting what you think you will have accomplished or where you will be. And we're going to keep those letters, and then they will go to them again in 12th grade.
And so people will these be put up on the website? Can these be put up on the website?
Yes.
So that people know that a lot of these goals are, or a lot of these lessons are things about how they're going to be more successful in school and in life. So how to manage priorities, how how to prepare for tests and final exams, how to get involved in your community, internet awareness, academic support, tolerance, bullying, things like that. So you're covering, it looks like, a lot of different topics. How are the students, how is this being fit into their day, number one? Number two, what's their reaction to this new, because this started in September? So I know I heard about it.
Yeah.
As this new thing we're doing.
I think it's the reaction has been positive from both teachers and students. I think we've been smart in the way we've implemented the program this year. It's only 20 minutes once a month. Tomorrow, it will be right after break. The kids all go to their advisory. Each student has a binder as well. So when they open the binder, immediately what they've previously spoken about is in there, and the kids have notes. They begin by looking at their goals, so they're reminded of what their goals have been or are for the year.
How long are they meeting for? 40?
Just 20 minutes. And then at the end of the year, of course, we'll reflect on the program and see if we want to increase the time.
Because the website says 40 minutes once a week, 20 minutes twice a week. So,
The Westport website?
no, the Connect, School Connect.
Oh.
They recommend a
yeah.
minimum
It
of
is
20
there.
minutes
Yeah.
twice a week and 40 minutes for once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on
That's
this?
their recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't. We were also very aware of not taking any time from, too much time from learning. We didn't want
45
that
minutes is a lot.
to do that. Yeah, that would be a lot of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms.
Very
Tudor.
nice.
And this is our brochure. You can just,
Thank you.
thank you.
The brochures tonight.
That's that's a. Can we make sure we get Karen, all this stuff up on either our website or? Okay. I have them here. I'll give them to you. Go ahead.
Do you get any brochures?
Okay, this budget list is also is with input from the high school administration, the faculty, and the school council. There are two requests, one from the school council and one from the librarian, that are not included in the request because I feel they can be covered from within what we already have. So the first thing on there is to upgrade the student management information system to include a parent portal that would allow parents to have access to lots of data about their child, particularly relative to attendance and grades. Right now, we do report out to parents every 4 weeks. They either get a progress report or a report card, but 4 weeks is a lot of time. So when I log into MMS right now, I already know for Q2 how the students are doing, but a parent won't know that until we mail progress reports until right before the holiday. So that upgrade, which I think, actually Mrs. Lewis did get a quote, and I think it might be a little bit lower than the $3,000, but that would allow parents to have access and hopefully engage them a little bit more and make it convenient for them to know how their children are doing, because high school teenagers are not always the best communicators.
Is that the iParent?
How they're doing. It actually would
Similar.
be part of our current system, which is
Okay.
MMS. So it's just another package that you purchase as part of the current system that would allow parents to have access to that data. But as I said, it's actually, I think, a little bit less than the $3,000 that's listed there. That was also identified. We just finished our self-study, and we had to come up with a list of critical strengths and needs, and that was identified as a critical need. The second item on the list is, Mr. Simonello mentioned earlier, we've discussed this, the Jump Start to Graduation. For the last 3 years, we've been fortunate enough to have a BCC grant that allows us to work with our most at-risk students in the summer. But in order for students to be able to participate, they have to be at risk of failing the MCAS. So the state now gives us lots of information, early warning indicators, as they call them, so we can actually generate a list. So what I did in preparation for this budget is I looked at the list that the state had generated for my current grade 9 students. And they identified 24 students at being at moderate or high risk as either not being high school graduates or not being college and career ready, and that's measured by their success in English and math. So of those 24 students that the state identified, only 12 of those students were actually able to attend the BCC program because they're also at risk of not passing the MCAS. But the other 12, they're at risk of not being successful, but they've had a good MCAS history, so they could not participate. So what we would like to do is to broaden that group to include not only the students at risk of not passing the MCAS, but students at risk, period, of being successful either in high school or post-high school. And what I'm seeing with this small group, so we're tracking them. We have the group that did participate in the summer program and the group that did not. And already this early in the year, we do see some significant differences in the two groups. The group that went to BCC, we're seeing better grades in English and mathematics. We're seeing better daily attendance rates. And the group that did not participate, we're not seeing that same level of achievement, which is quite early on in grade 9. Yeah.
Michelle, that assessment is based on an eighth graders?
The MCAS? It's their MCAS history, yes. So it's any MCAS they've taken prior to grade 9. So again, so that cost of $10,000 would help us reach that other group that we're not reaching with the current the grant that we get for BCC. Part of that program at BCC does start them on the path of career exploration. So we'd like to be able to continue that here. And just as Mr. Simonello mentioned, that Career Dimensions program would allow us to keep them engaged in exploring career opportunities and how they can be ready to enter that career, whether it's with a formal 2-year or 4-year college, technical school, or internship, or what might help them get where they need to be. So that's the approximate cost to have it here at the high school. We would love to be able to continue with the SAT prep class, and I notice I'm missing a 0 on that. That should be $2,500, not $250, because that would be a bargain. Last year, we did start the SAT prep class with some help from the Education Foundation. As I've reported to you earlier, and I continue to see, I just got the October and November SAT scores today. For those students who participated in the class, we are seeing a significant point increase in their SAT scores. So we'd like to be able to continue to offer that to our juniors and seniors. This year, for the 9th grade, with some money that Mrs. Medeiros, the school adjustment counselor, had left over, we were able to purchase agenda books for our grade 9 students. We are finding that they actually are using them, and it is helping organize them, particularly around their time management, when they have tests, when they have homework, when they have long-term projects that are due. So we would like to be able to continue that with current 9th grade as they move to 10th grade next year and add in the 9th grade. This year we've also been participating through our Race to the Top opportunity in implementing a comprehensive developmental guidance program. Part of that this year that we have found helpful, there's a guidance seminar once a quarter for each of the grades. And so what the students are doing with the guidance counselors, whatever's being done, they are keeping in a guidance portfolio. So once again, by the time they come to senior year, they will have a variety of things that will be very useful to them in planning their next steps after Westport High School. So we would like to be able to continue to work on that college and career readiness piece. And then the last thing was a new set of chemistry books. The current book is outdated, and it would be nice to have an updated textbook in chemistry class, which again, for students going to 4-year colleges, chemistry is a given that they should have here before they go on.
What are the 2 items that you said were?
The 2 items, one from the school council was a computer programming class, but I think with a little bit of training, I have 2 teachers in the business department right now, and I think either one of them would be more than capable of offering and teaching that course during the day here. And the second item was the request to ensure that the library stays open until at least 3 o'clock every day. But we have a campus supervisor who works until 3:30. So he would be quite capable of doing that. And in addition to that, Mrs. Antonelli does work with many students after school, and she's almost always here in the library. So I don't think that there needs to be a cost factor attached to keeping the library open.
2 questions. Have you looked into the grant again for the SAT prep with the Ed Foundation?
At this time, the guidance counselors and I, one of the first things we do, and we'll do it at the next guidance seminar, is to ask the students what their preference is to take it during the day, after school, or during vacation. Last year, many of our students carry very heavy schedules. They're reluctant to take it during the day. So we'll do that first, and then we'll pursue the grant based on where we think most kids will most likely take advantage of it.
Okay. And my next question was, how do you know the students are using the agenda books? And I'm not questioning that they're not, because I know every year we go out and buy a calendar because there are no agenda books here, and that's what my daughter uses. She has her own. So how do the teachers know that what we've spent on these they're actually using?
I wouldn't say that the teachers are as aware as the guidance counselors are. So when they're spending more time going into classes with the students, and they are following up, checking in, and so that's the feedback I'm getting from guidance, is that the 9th graders who received the agenda books this year, our first-time 9th graders, are actually using them. Again, making note of homework and assignments.
Tony?
Maybe I'm confused. So as of right now, Cheryl, the SAT prep class is unfunded as of right now.
It's
for this year.
unfunded. Yes,
For this
that
year.
is correct. And that's an approximate cost to run it after school. The $2,500 is about what we spent last year for the course to run. We had 2 sessions, 42 students, and then we also purchased the book so that they would have the
I mean,
prep book.
ideally, when would you want to have this money available?
I think we find that, of course, for juniors, many of them take the SAT in May or June. So ideally, we would want to have it sometime in March so that we could make plans if, in fact, we were going the same path, which would not surprise me. Again, as I said, given that the demanding schedule of most students here. Evenings would probably off the table because of work, because of athletics, because of activities. So I think it would either have to be an after school or something similar to the April vacation. We ran it for the 4 days during the April vacation last year.
Torturing the kids.
Michael?
Excuse me. You mentioned during the day for the SAT preparation. That's during the class day?
Correct.
And how would they arrange that?
That would have to run as a quarter
course.
elective class if they could fit it in.
Part of the schedule.
Traditionally, I was under the impression SAT preparation was done on the students' time outside of the learning day.
It varies. There are some places who offer it during the day. I think that one of the things we always try to do is to see when it's going to work best for the students. But again, many of them don't have room for any elective, so that might not be feasible, but we will explore it as we did last year. Last year, I don't think I had a single student who said they would take it during the day. They preferred it after school or during vacation.
And we're continuing to provide the students with other options for SAT prep, whether it be through outside schools or prep programs?
Some students take advantage of outside programs, but as anybody who's explored that knows, they are very costly to the student. Usually around $1,000.
So
outside.
is one option to offer our school site to a program that wants to come in after school or on a weekend and
We have done that, and that the participation has been limited, but yes, we have done that as well.
Great. Thank you.
May I ask a question? Just a clarification. You had the $10,000 for the 8th graders. That's in addition to BCC and also in addition to what the middle school is putting in for their students, correct?
Yes.
The other question that I had is, we've had the BCC program now for 3 years, and it's a competitive grant. What would be the impact if that grant either faded, got reduced, or just we weren't able to get it because other people are looking to get it?
I think you would see 2 dramatic changes if we did not get the BCC grant and we were unable to fund it from within. The first dramatic change you would see is an increase in students not scoring proficient and probably failing the MCAS test. When all is said and done, at the end of BCC last summer, we just have one student right now that is still trying to pass one of the MCAS tests, compared to in other years where it would not be uncommon for us to have as many as a dozen students that had not made. And we all know we don't get a diploma unless we score proficient, or we at least score 220, and then you can develop an EPP. That would be the first piece of that. The second piece of that is because the BCC program is offered in the summer, students who traditionally might go to summer school don't, because they want to pass the MCAS, so we do offer Westport High School credit. This past summer, because we were able to then get an additional few $1,000s for the satellite program here, there were some students, many students who came all day, so they were able to earn 15 credits towards high school graduation. That put 4 students back on a 4-year track to graduate, and they will graduate in June of 2013. That for other students on 10th and 11th graders, it restored them back to their initial rate of graduation, which, as we all know, particularly with overage students, when we get them when they're older to begin with, if they're 16 when they're coming in the door, it's very difficult for me to hold on to them until they're 20 or 21 years old. They're just not going to do it. So I think we would see our MCAS scores impacted, and I think we would see our dropout rate impacted if we did not have that.
How much is the total cost at this point, both what we put in and what the grants put in?
Including what I'm asking for here?
No, without that. That would be an addition if
So-
we got the BCC.
You probably have about 14,000. And then if you wanted to add to it. And the reason that's, in case anybody's wondering, if I'm only talking 9th graders, why would it be 10,000? Because what I would like to do, at least this summer with that money, is go back to those these current 9th graders who could not take advantage of BCC last year, and at least put them in for the second summer, especially since some of them have some failing grades, if for no other reason for some credit recovery, to keep them on track to graduate in 4 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
On to budget update, Dr. Colley.
As we start to put together the budget for next year, it doesn't mean this year's budget stops. We're still tracking a little bit of an additional funding. However, if you remember at prior school committee meetings, I had brought up that we had seen at least one student return earlier this summer that generated some savings in special ed. We do have 4 students that over the course of the fall have either moved in or they have been assigned to Westport by other agencies like Department of Child Services. So I'm not sure where that 60 is yet. Some of them we're still in negotiations with the state whether are really our students or not. Other students, for example, we have one that we want to start next week here instead of an out-of-district placement. If that happens, there'll still be some costs that we will incur because the student is got some significant needs that we'll have to add some staff to. However, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the higher cost of having that student out of district. So once we get back into the spring and we know whether some of these students are really ours or whether we've been able to bring at least the one back here, we'll be able to give you a balance of, here's how much we saved on the one student, here's how much we have to spend on the few that have cropped up over this last few months. The other part that you had was circuit breaker. Circuit breaker last year, we had been cautiously optimistic. When we put together circuit breaker for not this past year, the previous year, the state had already cut it the year before that, so we put it at 40%. we had had indication from the state that they would raise that level of support, so we put it at 60. But by the time the summer came around and the state closed its budget out, they told us it was going to be 70%. Based on those changes, we hadn't anticipated the 60 to the 70 range increase, so we were anticipating about $90,000 to be coming to us in addition from what we had calculated in the spring. However, now this fall, or just actually a couple of days ago, about a week ago, the state recalculated the revenue projections. They're not getting as much revenue through taxation at the state level, so the governor is invoking perhaps some 9C cuts. One of them would probably be the circuit breaker. Again, these are some of the things that, we start the year, we look at one thing, and then by the time halfway through the year, we find that things that we think are savings or additional funding goes away. We do have still some savings in the staff that left over the course of the summer, and we hired other staff that weren't as expensive. We do have several maternity leaves running right now, depending on how long they last. It may be a few $1,000s less, because we'll have to pay both for the teacher that's on maternity if they have sick leave versus the person substituting for them. But I think we'll be okay with that. So as you look at the budget, I don't see us as being in any area where we're going to go into the negatives. You do have some areas that we haven't done transfer, and that's one question that I have for the school committee. If you would like to do transfers as we go along, or like in other years, we wait till, maybe later in the spring and do one big set of transfers once we know exactly where the monies are. So, for example, you have professional development teacher days. We know that we'll have at least one more, and we have a few half days in the spring. But right now it looks like we have $123,000 in deficit, where the money is really sitting in the teacher lines. We just haven't transferred it. So it's one question. I know last year I started giving a more detailed description of areas where we would need transfers. And again, you see that again in the professional development substitutes, which we would be transferring again from the budgeted subline. Let's see, where else? The same thing in sped salaries. You have $34,000 in the negative. It's not really in the negative. It would need to be transferred. We're right now at about 30% spent in all these lines. We have not, for example, we do not generally encumber salaries. So even though we say 30% over the course of the next 6 months and into the summer, because some of the teachers get paid over the summer, we will be spending close to what we have. In terms of regular expenses, that's a little bit higher. We're about 35% expended. A lot of that is regular expenditures. We do a lot of it at the beginning of the year. For example, the principals will go ahead and order a lot of stuff at the beginning of the year to start up the year, but there's still quite a few things left to encumber. For example, we have some money in testing. We have some money in custodial, building heat. We haven't gotten into, the last couple of days we started to spend some money there. And we also have utilities that still are not expended. So this may be one of those areas where, depending on how the winter goes, we may see some savings or we may not. My biggest concern is the middle school, because as you know, with the monitoring we've been doing of the PCBs, we are running those systems, the exchange of the air in the systems at the middle school is a lot higher than it should be on a day-to-day basis for the last year. Last year was a very mild winter, so it didn't affect us as much. This year it may come back and hit us if it gets really cold. correct? SPED expenses, again, that's where you see the tuitions. Once we get back in the spring, hopefully we'll have some answers for some of those variables of students, including the one that hopefully will start this week at the elementary school in one of our self-contained classrooms. Any questions on that?
Michael?
If you can just recap a little bit, the private tuition, none of that is yet to be encumbered? Does that mean all of the private tuition SPED students have returned? Line 9,300 under the regular ed and SPED expenses on page 3, the private tuition.
We don't encumber it, we pay as we go. So on a monthly basis, we get bills. And that's the one where I'm telling you, right now, we had about 160,000 that we had considered as savings, but we have 4 kids that we're basically negotiating to see if they're really our students. The minute the Child Services places them in a foster home in Westport, they become our students. So then we have to negotiate what our cost is. If we can bring them, and these are all students that are in out-of-district placements already, if we can bring them in, the cost would be greatly reduced because in many cases they're in systems that don't have the same programs we have. So right now I am not sure whether we will have that whole 160.
No, I understand. My question is, the total budget appropriation is 337.
Yes.
And the total encumbered is 0%. So have we don't have any students in outplacement with private tuition, or we do? I understand the piece of this sum that we might not be responsible for. The $337,000 hasn't been, none of it has been spent yet, according to this document.
No, because we haven't gotten, we're paying up, we first pay out of circuit breaker reimbursement. When that runs out, then we dip into this line. Circuit breaker is a revolving account. So we start from the revolving account and then we dip into this one. And if we have additional savings, we use this line to transfer to other accounts within our budget. If we did it the other way around.
Okay. Any idea what the amount is that we've used out of the revolving account for private tuition?
Question.
I don't have that with me. but
Because
I will get that.
I understand the piece of we're tracking some savings, but really, I believe what we're saying is, unless we know what the status is of the revolving account, the entire private tuition discussion, we really can't decide looking at this document. The second question I have is relative to legal services expense, going back to page 1 on regular education and SPED. Do we have a separate line item for special education? This question just came up because you talked about some negotiations, if you will, or discussion on who's responsible, that we may be responsible for outplacement versus in-placement. Do we have attorneys involved in any of those discussions?
Yes, we do.
Would it make sense to separate the legal expense line so we separate special education related legal expenses?
We can, in the more detailed budget, if you remember, once a quarter we give you the big broken down line by line budget. In that line by line budget, we have that broken out by special ed and regular ed.
Rough idea what the breakdown is between the two? 50-50 or? Because what I'm just trying to get, you talked about a couple of situations where we have some legal expenses related,
Yes.
And here I see we've spent 54% of our legal services line item. I'm just trying to get, and that we have continued litigations with special ed. I'm trying to get a handle on, are we going to overspend our legal services line item budget? So what I might ask for that more expanded budget, perhaps for the budget committee, is if we could make sure that we also have anticipated legal expenses, such as if our attorneys would make sure we have an updated invoice.
Our invoices, we get them from the legal company. We get them on a monthly basis, so you see those in your warrant articles when you come in and sign the warrant. And the bills are right there, and they're two separate bills usually. One for regular legal expenses, things that we may be in negotiations with the teachers, those kind of expenses, and then you get another bill just for the legal situations we get into with special ed. So there's two separate bills, so I can bring that to the next meeting where we can separate it. I do not see at this point, so far this year, it's no different from other years in terms of the number of cases or the number of situations that we've brought all the way to, for example, arbitration from previous years. So I don't see that, but again, that could change tomorrow. So if, for example, that parent comes in, they decide they don't want to bring the student here, but we still feel that student belongs here, that may be a more costly thing, but I won't know until the student comes here and starts.
Right, I'm going on beyond I understand that the anticipated flexible budget on special ed is related to how many students we may or may not feel we can service within district. But I'm looking at the legal services line item as a whole, and so now what I'm saying is to make sure we have all our invoices, or certainly within 30 days, if there's pending cases, if the invoices, do we get invoiced for any cases that are still pending? Or does
We
it-
get invoiced as we go along, yes. So in other words, it's not like we'll wait until the case gets resolved and then we'll send you the bill.
Yeah.
They don't do it that way. So if they spend 3 hours on case 1, 2 hours on case 2, 5 hours on case 3, they'll itemize that in the bill and send that to us as we go along. So there may be some variability month to month. So for example, you may be setting up the case in month 1 and 2, then month 3 you go to the hearing. The hearings are a little bit longer. You may see a spike in the amount of hours that they're billing us for. But normally we're about 1 month off. So the bills that we're incurring this month would be coming next month. So figure you 50%. That means we're a little over half of what we spent this year, or what we expected to spend this year, because figure we're halfway through the year, but we haven't gotten the December bills, obviously, because we're still in December. So we may be a little off. But I don't think it's the legal part on the SPED side that has
We haven't gotten the
increased.
November bill either, probably, in this report.
Not in this one,
Right, so,
because this is
and that's the same firm that we use for non-sped legal?
yes, it's the
Okay,
same
so it's all
firm.
the
Yes.
same process. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
This may lead into two questions. First being, if we have 4 new students coming in, are we past that drop-dead date of when the other district that's sending it owns it for the school year?
Not when they move in. So in other words, when Child Services places a student in that district, Child Services determines who is responsible, and when they put them in your district, they're yours, regardless of what happens.
So we've had 4 students from DCF present to our district.
3 and 1 that we were fighting from even in the spring, the one that I told you that we never found out until the summer that they had moved in. We did a lot of investigations. We actually sent the SRO to the parents' home a couple of times to try to find if they really were living there. I just got told about a week and a half ago that they did find that the parent is here. So we really don't have much of a case to say, although we're still trying to petition the state to say if they didn't notify us by the deadline they should have, so we could have put it in our budget, it should be somebody else's responsibility. I don't think we're going to win that one.
And if it does go to somebody else's responsibility, are we able to recoup our legal costs because
Generally,
we had to
no.
contest it?
Generally, no, because you're basically fighting the state, and the state's going to say that's the cost of doing business.
In the same section, regular ed and sped expenses, new textbooks, 13,000. But it's sold.
There were some of the textbooks that you have approved over the last few school committee meetings since we opened the year. So we have been using that. It's not just textbooks; it's also materials. Sometimes.
No, we haven't spent that. Oh, that's gone. Am I looking this right?
Where are you?
2410.
I know we spent some money on textbooks. 24.
It's under legal services, a couple lines down, same page. Page 1.
Page 1 of the regular ed and sped expenses.
Page 1, not on page 1.
Yeah,
Page 1.
Number 2410, 13,000.
There it is, I was looking for that.
410 textbooks, 13.
Not under salaries. You're
And
talking under
24
the expenses.
replacement.
2410.
2410 textbooks new. No, that's unencumbered. Those are books that we're expecting to buy, new textbooks. Remember when we went ahead?
December.
Well, remember when we went ahead and got money from the town? We had to put it somewhere. So we put some of the money in that line because part of it was for textbooks. And that is regular ed.
Michael?
A couple of questions. One is on the budget, so let me ask that one. On page 1, line 2110, is a description Marge Condon.
On which one, Mike? On
Same page.
Same
Page
page.
1.
Thank you. So it was regular and
Yeah.
special, okay.
It lines up.
Now, I know she was a previous curriculum director. In fact, I'm often confused when we go to sign the bill warrant, and there is some descriptions that are simply a name of staff members, and I haven't been able to decipher if it's reimbursement or what they are, so.
No, that's their expense line, meaning supplies, materials, things that their department uses.
Yeah, well,
And yeah, that
it may
should
be
change.
a better descriptor rather than using a person's name, because
agree.
we're approving a warrant with a person's name, and it looks on the warrant as if that person is getting a check, as in this example. So if we could look through those descriptions.
I'm sure that person is not getting additional monies.
So, thank you. The second so that was just that housekeeping piece. The other question I have, going back a little bit here in your presentation, the circuit breaker.
Mhm.
So we anticipated that the circuit breaker funds would be returned at between 60 and 70%,
60. It's
Okay.
what we put into the budget.
and that was in our total budget. So
It's in a revolving account.
So that's above and beyond in our revolving account. The net effect of the 9C cuts is we now can anticipate less funding.
Yes.
The circuit breaker is related to expenses related to special education.
From last year, yes.
Right. So are we looking to, how have we budgeted that revolving account? In other words, now that there's going to be less money there, and
When-
we've just expanded our salaried positions in special ed, might it make sense to hold off until we have a better idea of what the circuit breaker return will be this year? Because it's going to be less. We just,
Right, we just don't know exactly how much they're estimating, and between 4 and 5% of what they originally had told us we would get. Two things. One, we did have circuit breaker in the sense of planned out 1 year to the next, because again, we know that that's money you have to spend for special ed expenses, and particularly we use them for paying tuitions. And what usually happens is the state originally, years ago, like 5-6 years ago, was steady at about 70%. When we hit the downturn of the economy, they dropped it to about 40. So for a couple of years there, we're putting in as 40% of what we spent the previous year. We'll get a reimbursement. We'll put that towards the expenses that we expect to have, the kids that we know are going to be in residential facilities or in out-of-district placements. This past year, when we heard that, you know, it's an election year, they may have additional funding, they said expect more, but they didn't tell us how much. So making some rough calculations as to what both the House and the Senate and the governor had put in there, basically the House and the governor, we put it at around 60%. But our budget goes to bed at town meeting in May, and they really put the budget together till basically end of June, and then they said it's 70%. So it was kind of like money that we didn't have accounted for anywhere in the budget. Obviously, we could use it, but now it's reduced. And again, that's why I say we spend out of that account first, and then we go into our budget. But if you're referring to the addition of a sped supervisor, we're paying that out of monies that we had in the budget for supervisors in general, that we had not used this year as of maybe a couple of weeks ago. We used a little bit for summer work, but we hadn't used it because we were still in basically not negotiations, but we were trying to work with the teachers in the labor management committee as to how those positions would be used. And I told the teachers that I wouldn't hire anybody for those positions until we knew how they would be used, and we had some agreement between the teachers and the administration, which we haven't had yet. So I was going to use that money, and now there isn't that money for this year. So I'll probably, if we institute those positions again, won't be till next year. There may be a little bit of money left in circuit breaker, depending on how much they actually cut us, because my guess is the cuts are not going to be uniform across all districts. So when the state actually announces what the cuts for 9C are going to be, then we'll know how much of that $90,000 extra that we expected to get is really going to be just smoke and mirrors, money that never came.
No, good.
To continue the conversation on the circuit breaker account, is that listed on our revolving accounts?
No, that's what I was looking for. So I will make sure that it's on this so that we can track it better.
So
We have the transportation reimbursement, we have school lunch, and then we have the, no, I'll make sure it goes into this.
So we
It's
are
interesting
not going to be
how we
relying on the circuit breaker refund to fund the new administration position that was established in the past.
No.
But we were relying on it for classroom specialists.
I'm sorry.
You just spoke about supervisors. Is that in-class supervisors?
Last year we had .2 supervisors sprinkled throughout each of the buildings. This year, going into the new year, we had money in the budget for those positions. We just held off using that money for supervisors because we wanted to talk to the teachers or the teacher union due to the new educator evaluation process that we're in as to if or how we would use those kind of positions within the district, because the way those positions were established when we did negotiations with them a couple of years ago, they were supervisory position, meaning they would evaluate teachers. And because we originally had them as part teacher and part supervisor, it kind of makes it a little difficult for teachers to figure out is this my colleague or is this my supervisor? And if they're going to be kind of like peer supervisors, how is that going to work? We haven't worked that out with them. That's why we have the labor management committee going on. And to be honest, because it's a new program across the whole district, I don't see that question being settled for a while yet. Like, we spent a whole section of a whole meeting time just talking about class placements. So to get to that one, it'll be a long time, I think.
All right.
So we use that money
So
instead.
that has nothing to do with the circuit breaker reimbursement?
No.
Okay. It came up, I didn't know what the relationship was. Okay, thank you.
On to the middle school ventilation prints. Mike?
Sorry it took so long to get you up here. So it's been a long day for you.
You can't see them on the computer.
Dr. Colley asked me to stop by and bring the drawings for the heating system for the middle school. And if you had any questions about it that you wanted to discuss, or that's why I'm here.
It was tough to look at it through our little sheets.
Yeah,
that we
that's
had.
why I
know you
told
have
them to bring
here.
big ones.
Yeah.
With the rooms that we've seen that have been consistently hot, or at least fluctuating below and above the line that we're setting for ourselves at 300,
Yeah.
is there any correlation at all between any of the ventilation between any of those rooms that are consistently above and below?
The only things, I'm going to go by, I'll talk about the office area. There are a couple of small rooms over there that don't have any exhaust fans associated with them rooms, and it does show that in the drawing. So they did build it the way it was designed. That's been the biggest culprit in there. Otherwise than that, like the administration offices in the front, what they've done on a lot of them is they'll just have fin tube radiation, and they'll have an exhaust fan that goes through the roof, through ductwork. And what that actually does, if you walk into the office areas, you'll notice that some of the doors have big spaces in the bottom of them. That actually draws the air through there, and that's how that room gets its exchange. But they never, they based it, I'm assuming, on the amount of people that they were figuring going to be in that space. Not like a classroom where you have a univent, and during an hour, that univent is changing the air in that room like 5 times. They figured with the space being an office space, that's why they did what they did. Not that they would, if they were building a new building today, they wouldn't use this technology. But from the late 60s, this is how they did it.
Now, the ventilation, has anyone been up and actually been through the ventilation system at all? And
Every year, Eric, I go up on the roof, and we check every single exhaust fan, and we also do it inside too. We call a paper check. You put your paper up to a grill and it'll suck it up. And also every year, every single univent we go through. At that point, if it's a motor replacement, or you can pick up air leaks, because that system, that's a pneumatic system, runs on all air pressures. Where everything today would be digital, and it's much more accurate and it's much more easier. You get a lot more information because each there's a computer in every, like the Matcomer school. Use that as an example. That's our newest heating system. In each univent, there's actually a little computer, and when I go online at the Matcomer school, I can actually see each room. I know what the temperature is. I know what the air exchange is. I know what the air temperature is coming out of the unit. There's a lot of information. It's coming at the damper positions. You don't have that with that because they didn't have that kind of technology back then.
have you ever costed anything out for the middle school, what it would be to put that same type of system at the Macomber at the middle school?
No, honestly, no,
Okay.
because you're talking an engineer.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about redoing the whole thing over again from scratch.
Okay.
You'd have to run wires and to a hub and. it's
Now,
whole
just a
different
little
thing.
bit off topic, if I could. Last night I was at the music room, and I saw that they put some really nice, quite impressive, it's just like a whole new wall. They painted the gray wall, the
Yeah.
brick.
Yeah.
Has any testing been done since they've done that with that room?
Yeah. Yeah, we
Any
painted.
idea how it's come out yet?
We painted that. Go ahead.
I think you should have a copy of the testing. The latest testing for room 24 should be there. which is the music room that you're referring to.
I thought it was tested today, that's why it said 12/12, so was it tested it or the results?
No,
came
no,
back
no,
today?
no. That's under the expected, when is it going to be tested again? We did a test in September, a bunch of rooms, so we're doing it quarterly.
That
September,
was just thinking of that
December.
Special,
That's in capsule.
Yeah, but that we did
That was.
last year.
Last school year.
Yeah,
oh,
last school
so it
year.
has been tested with that new, I
Yeah.
thought that was just recently done, am I
No, no, no,
misunderstanding?
and it stayed low. What we're trying to do, and perhaps this will answer your general question about the health of the heating system or the ventilation system, really. The problem is, when we went ahead and opened the building, one of the things we wanted to be very sure about is that this system would be able to exhaust more air than it usually did, because we figure if there's PCBs in it, the more you can exchange clean air or less air from the outside that would conceivably have less concentrations of PCBs, exchange that more quickly. The problem is the system is limited as to how much air can it exchange over time, and when it does, you're losing some of the heat. So one of the things we're doing is a very limited, basically as part of this quarterly testing, we're going to take 3 rooms that would have been tested this quarter anyway. One, which is the music room, we're going to paint not just the walls, but also the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking down the ceiling tiles, the
I
things
saw
that
last
we...
night it was all down.
Yeah.
Well, the things we found in the guidance room that had PCBs that we didn't expect would have it. So we're going to seal the cement that's on the ceiling that was never touched. We took out the ceiling tiles, and at that point, there is nothing left in that room that isn't new.
Mhm.
So we're then going to shut off the ventilation over the Christmas break for a little bit. We're going to shut off the ventilation in the old principal's office, and we're going to shut off the ventilation in room 279, which is now being used by the remedial math teacher. Give it a few days, see if the lack of ventilation or less ventilation spikes those numbers, so we know then, hey, if we don't keep running the ventilation full tilt, we may have an issue anywhere in the building. But the problem is, a lot of these units are what, 40?
They're original.
40.
1969.
Yeah, so
And if it doesn't spike, then we know it's the ventilation system.
if it doesn't spike, we know that the work that we did to reduce the amount of PCB-laden materials is working, but that perhaps we don't need to run the system full tilt. We can dial it back a little bit, because I'm afraid if we keep running it the way it is, 2 things are going to happen.
Breakdown.
One, you're going to break them down sooner than expected, because basically you're doing 3 years worth of running in 1 year.
That's right.
And 2, if it's colder than it was last year, because last year was a dream. I mean, I remember days in January that were like 60s. But if it really turns into a cold year, we're going to be looking at maybe $100,000 worth of extra money spent on just heating that building.
Now, was the study that we, did
That-
that have anything to do with the ventilation, or like what it would cost to have a whole new ventilation system put in also?
This is why we're doing that study, because if it's simply that, hey, the ventilation is not really contributing as much to keeping the air clean, it's just making sure the materials are out, then what we can do is, if the study come back and says, hey, your ventilation system is ancient, 40, 50 years, things are going to start to break down, you may want to replace it. You can replace it with not the top-of-the-line model. If we find that you really have to keep that air exchange going, you're going to have to put in a ventilation system that has some air heat exchangers, which are probably more expensive. So that will go into the equation, and perhaps we're trying to see if we can give you a truer picture of what it would take to get that building fixed, if you will.
Thanks.
Mike, before you move on, you mentioned the system at the middle school right now. You said it was the baffles, whatever you call them.
It's pneumatic.
The
Pneumatic.
mechanics, not the valves, the registers that open and
The
close.
univents
Those operate on.
on air pressure.
What do you mean, like vacuum lines? you
No,
mean, like?
it's not. It's pressurized lines. What it is.
The reverse.
Thermostats. When thermostat calls for heat, You hear a thermostat in the schools go. When you hear it making that hissing sound, what it's actually doing is the dampers inside that unit.
That's
and
what dampers, that's what.
Right.
You see them dampers are closing, and what it'll also do is there's modular valves that control the water, which goes through the coil. When they close, if the room is satisfied with warmth, it bypasses the coil. It just keeps running through the loop. When it starts calling for heat, that valve will open up, and then the hot water starts going through the coil, and different things will happen depending on what the pressure is. That pressure in that thermostat is constantly changing. The magic number is 8 on them thermostats. When that thermostat is at 8, that's telling you that the room is at the set temperature. In other words, if it's 70, and if I get 8 pounds of pressure, and it's actually 70 degrees in that room, if we set it at 7, that's perfect.
Right.
That thermostat's right on the money. And it's also telling you your controls are also. There's devices inside there that control how cold of air that will come in. There's electric pneumatic switches, there's pneumatic electric switches, all these things, there's a lot of things in there to make, but this is old technology. And
How often do we balance that system?
I do that every year.
And it's hot water, you said, Mike.
It's a hot
So we
water
have a
system.
central boiler somewhere.
You got boilers in the boiler
Two.
room.
That's,
We have
that's
3 of
pumping
them.
that water through the school.
And that's, yes, there's
So
3
the
of them.
water's, the hot water's in the system, it's just, we're not opening up the baffles.
You're controlling it. And you're also, what you're also
So it's like
doing-
your hot water tank at home, you're constantly, that water's constantly
Constantly
hot.
And running through the building.
But the difference between here and in your home, and this is where the big money comes in, to save you money, is the zone valves, which control that water temperature that runs through this house. Okay, we'll call them municipal water house, that runs through this. In other words, what this does is it works on a scale. It works from a 0 to 180 scale. When it's 0 degrees outside, it'll run at 180 degrees, okay? When it's 40 degrees outside, you take that 180 and you knock off 40 degrees off of it. Now you got 140 degree water running through the loop. Your boilers will still make 180 degree water, but you're running 140 degree water through the loop, and the boilers keep feeding it to keep it at that set temperature all the time. As it gets warmer, it starts opening up more. It starts putting hotter water, and also reverse if it starts getting cooler. Yeah.
Okay, do we have efficiency numbers for our boilers? Do we know?
Yes, them are done every year, because that's part of the specs. When the boiler contractor comes in and he tunes the boilers, he gives us a printout.
And how would those, if you know, Mike, how would those compare to a new system?
I believe the middle school boilers, I want to say somewhere around 80%, which is pretty
It's
good.
very good.
I remember a report saying that we did very well with our heating in between all 3 schools, 4
Yeah.
schools.
The actual, we've had 3 audits regarding the efficiency of our systems, and the 3 audits have come back excellent. You had numbers compatible with the new building,
Mhm.
which is, I'm proud of, I'm very proud of that.
I know
We've
we've
talked
actually
about
commended you
this.
once or twice here
Yeah.
a few years ago
Yeah.
by doing so well.
'Cause, I mean, them studies are important too. I mean, they can show a problem at the same time, and they show that there isn't a problem. I mean, it's a great thing.
Did you have your hand up, Mike?
Sure. So as we discussed the circulation of the hot water,
Yeah.
we also have some air movement fans and
The unit, yeah, and
The
in
univents.
each univent, go ahead, I want to, go ahead.
as well as exhaust. Is it incoming or outgoing, the vents that are in the roof?
The roof are taking the air out of the room.
So that's pushing it out.
Right.
So they're all exhaust, if
They're all
you will.
exhaust fans.
So the air in the building is passing through these univents.
The air.
As it's heated.
Yeah, but what it's also doing, and this is the important part about having a healthy building, these univents, which is totally different from a house, is like having a window right behind your radiator that you keep opening up. You have outside air coming in. And when the room starts getting too warm, it starts drawing more outside air in to start cooling the room down. We commonly get complaints, there's cold air coming out of my univent. Yeah,
It's
it
too
has
hot.
to be. If it was hot all the time, it'd be 100 degrees in here. And so it does that happy balance. And that also gives you the fresh air in the room as a healthy thing for just colds alone, never mind the PCB issue that we're dealing with.
Right, and I know that during the cleanup, we vacuumed out all those units and cleaned them up.
Yeah, they clean them, they use, I think it's, they use some sort of cleaner, mean green.
And I'm just, have we ever done any actual wipes on the interior of the vent that the air passes through?
I believe Bob May has done them tests, Mike.
Okay, because the only reason I ask, and I wouldn't expect that we would know what's inside those units, but I have heard of some ventilation systems that PCBs were found inside as part of the manufacturing through the welds or the caulking. I really don't know, but I know that was the culprit, so I wanted to make sure that we had at least made sure.
It's a very short path from the outside of the building to the unit vent, because they're always mounted on the, I should say always, but 90% of the time, 95% of the time, they're only mounted on the outside of the building. There's a little short piece of ductwork that goes there. In the middle school, there's an eave, and underneath that eave, you'll see all the louvers, the openings for the air to come into through that way. So it's a short path through that room 24, like Dr. Colley is talking about. That's one of the exceptions.
Interior room.
That room actually has
Right.
ductwork. When that actually puts air into the room, normally we don't have that, but because of the size of that room, and they wanted to disperse it evenly through that room, and that ductwork was also professionally cleaned last year.
Right. We did do that in that room.
We did do that.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if we actually wipe the wipe tests we do, if they did
Little
those.
telegraph
and-
machine.
What they actually found, because if I'm hearing you correctly, there was one school and a few other buildings where they found that in the caulk they used around the joinery of the actual conduits
Conduits,
or
right.
the ductwork. We didn't have that in this room, which is about the only room that has a lot of ductwork going into the
Yeah,
air
that's all
exchange.
folded seam.
Right, it's just folded seam, so it didn't have the same characteristics at those other places. But just as one of those, just in case the inside of that had any PCBs, that was one of the things we did do in that room, because it's an unusual room, and if you remember, it had huge levels of PCB when we first went in there and tested. So we not only did the walls, we took out the carpets, and we also cleaned out the ductwork. But doing all of those, it went like from thousands of parts, micrograms per meter squared to, I don't know, it was like 50 something.
Yeah.
So it dropped right down.
Mike, and the new systems, do they also use water generally?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So it's just
You can do water
the
and
actual
you can do
units
water
are
and
just
steam, but
much more
There's nothing wrong with the
efficient
water
and more-
clock. Right.
And they basically work the same way. You circulate the air, heat it, and cool it.
Exactly. There's a basic principle here of what they're doing. It's just how efficient the new stuff is. It's good stuff.
So you could actually remove one of these units
Yep.
and install a new unit in its place.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
what we did at the
Oh, yeah.
Macomb School. When we put a heating system in there, in, I think it was 2002, 2003, that's actually what they did. Matter of fact, the Macomb School used to have steam. And now
So you don't necessarily need to redo the whole heating, the actual plumbing for the heat, the hot water. That's all there. It's just a matter of
Right.
tying in a new system, new control.
The only thing you're going to start, if you start looking into doing something like that, you got to, like valves and stuff, you got to make sure that this stuff all works, this stuff is,
What about the boilers and because the boilers is the other part. I know in some of the other schools would replace the actual boilers or parts of the boilers, like the
Used-
burners.
Used to have two boilers there before, two big Cleaver Brooks boilers. And I think it was somewhere around the mid-80s, they put new boilers in that building.
Natural gas, right?
They're natural
Yes.
gas. Yeah, we got rid of all of our oil tanks and all that stuff. So we're clean as far as all that stuff goes. And what they did is they put 3 boilers down there. 2 only run at a time. Sometimes 1 runs depending on what the load is. But that's what we have at the middle school.
Anything else on the prints that Mike brought? Mike, thank you. I can tell you
Thank you.
enjoy this because your face lights up when you talk about
Oh, yeah.
boilers.
So get him going.
Thank you both.
All right, thank you.
He likes it. I know at the last meeting of the subcommittee, we had talked a little bit about using a very similar timeline for the budgets. I gave you pretty much, took kind of the template from last year and put in different numbers for this year. So if you would like to take a peek at that, just tell me if you want to adjust it any which way. I also got today from FinCom, apparently they met last night, and gave to you a list of what they see the key dates in the town, kind of backing it up from town meeting, so that people know when they have to have the budgets to town and to the FinCom, which I know will fit with their schedule. But I just want to make sure that perhaps I can take draft out of that. The only thing that I have not discussed a lot with you is the capital part of the budget and what we're going to do about that. But perhaps we can have a quick discussion on that.
Anybody want to open this up?
Dr. Colley, so the town administrator wanted a level service budget on the 18th.
And I told him it wasn't going to happen because the school committee did not. The school committee was going to approach it from the point of view of first building a building-based needs budget. That would take a little bit more time than to just give them a level service budget on the 18th. But that's why I want to make sure that we can agree to this kind of a timeline so I can send something to the town so they know more or less when to expect us to provide them something.
And last year we worked off a level service budget from the prior year. Should I say this year's?
No, last year we gave them options, or we gave them different. If we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and they latched on to something and ran with it. And we had to keep going back and saying, no, there were needs, there are things we want to do. That's where we got into the
what we ended up with. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah. It wasn't level service; it was level funded.
Funded budget.
Right.
Michelle?
Michael. Sorry, I was reading.
Looking through this, the dates are, follow the process that we would need. We probably would want to schedule some, after looking at this, some time for subcommittee to look at the process as we're going through and have some input, but I don't think that presenting this to the town side would leave them in any lurch. They can make an anticipation, they can make a projection based on their own ideas, which I would be more comfortable, so that they don't translate any projections we provide as our new budget.
Well, and that's part of the difficulty that we always run into is we have our drafts that we're just discussing, and they seem to say, well, we like this draft, or we like this part, or we don't like that draft, we got to give you something else. And, I'm just happy to say, hey, by the end of February, middle of March, you will get our budget. I mean, they may want it sooner than that, but...
And as well as our budget subcommittee, I would think that if there's an interim meeting with FinCom that we can go and share our progress and try to address questions they have, it would assist both areas reaching a consensus type budget.
Honestly, I think this is one of those things that people need to be flexible until the last minute, or when it's time to put it in front of the, to publish it. Because, we go to the FinCom, they give us suggestions, they give us ideas, we bring them back here, we may make adjustments, just like when we do the budget hearing. It's supposed to be able to hear the public, and if they have suggestions or ideas that we want to incorporate, we change the budget. That doesn't mean that what we present at a budget hearing or in front of the FinCom should be the end result until we get to the last part where we say, here's the budget from the school committee, and hand it over. So I agree with you. We could go several times to them. They may want to ask us, hey, how come you're thinking about doing this? Because we're thinking about it. Doesn't mean we're going to do it.
I think that bold disclaimer that you said in terms of making sure they know this is not a comprehensive draft as we're discussing it with them, but
right.
including them in the process. Great.
Is there a motion to accept the timeline here?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion on the timeline that's laid out? It's pretty similar to.
That's why I give you last year's, so you would see more or less where we're falling in with last year's. The only thing that I was going to say is, today you heard from the principals, and there were some discussions that they had with people like Mike in terms of the capital needs, and that's what I'm saying. So when you see the January 9th date there where it says needs-based budget, my hope is we can then have, by building, some of these other departments that go across all the schools, what are the needs that came from the buildings to say, hey, you know, the elementary school needs a new phone system, so does the high school, so does, well, all of a sudden, we just need a new phone system, but how much is it, and can we break it out by building if that's how you want to do it? The same thing with technology. I know you heard a few bits and pieces of what people at the building are saying we need for technology. I'm sure Beth will say, with the park assessments coming, we may want to be thinking of scaling it over the next few years so we can get to the point where we could actually do the park assessments. So there'll be a few things like that, but I think you saw the bulk of it, of the needs or the requests today. And then after that first meeting in January, we can start going through and prioritizing, taking out, putting in, adjusting.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The contract staffing analysis.
Again, that was just looking at the, well, we added in the special town meeting so that we know more or less where we're starting and what the contracts will probably look like. We do have to go into negotiations with ASME. So, just so you know, these are just projections kind of out of the, looking at the teachers and kind of applying the same assumptions throughout. Doesn't mean that that's exactly how it's going to look like. That's why I'm always hesitant to say to the town, hey, look at what we're doing, without us there to explain it. So that gives you an idea of where we would be. Again, hovering around that 2.5.
And the spreadsheet just breaks it down.
Yeah. For example, the new sped teacher at the middle school, that was something we added after the year started. If you remember, Mr. Simonello came in, I think it was August, just before the school year started. The sped supervisor, self-contained para. That was, again, another one. We got one of those kids back into this district that needed an additional para. And my only other concern, like I said, is the capital. You know, we have a long list of needs. Any other questions? Anything you want me to research between now and January 9th?
So the 15,180 is taking into account the 70 from just the November special town meeting.
Yes, because it's an allocation, therefore it gets added to what used to be a strictly level funded budget.
And none of these things that we presented with earlier.
Do they? No,
None
they're
of
not
that
in
is
this.
here, none of
No,
it.
none of that isn't here.
Because on top of that was, I think, 15,545, I think, was what added up all those other things.
Oh, you
into-
added it up?
What was the total?
It depends, because I was,
15, when it came up like 15,5 something.
I was looking at the elementary
Everything
school,
they wanted.
and some of those were like overlaps, so
Mhm.
while we were doing this, I was making the same calculations. I sent them
It was all 15,5.
I sent them an email saying, like, can you tell me if these are really overlaps or additions to?
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's a big number.
All right, on to. Sorry.
PCBs?
The
Yeah,
RFPs.
He was going back. Awarding of RFP for WMS PCDs.
We went ahead and put out the RFPs. We had 7 requests for the documents. We had 2 companies, and I'm not going to try to remember the exact name. One was ECS. I'm trying to figure out what ECS stood for. Environmental Compliance Services. Put in a good RFP, and Fuss and O'Neill put in an RFP as well. I had myself and Dr. Dargan. I was going to have Melissa do it, but she had a death in the family, so she hadn't been in for a couple of days. But we went ahead and did the non-price proposal evaluation. Basically, in the proposal, there was points awarded for example, being at least in existence for 5 years. So if you had more than 5 years, you would get 3 points. If you had just the 5 years, you get 2 points. If you had less than 5 years, you could get a 1. Basically, because it's difficult to evaluate firms that are at this level of complexity. And then what you do is at the end, after doing that, then you open up their price proposal itself. Fuss and O'Neill had the better proposal in terms of the non-price, but only by a few points. But the big difference was, and we just did the openings today, they don't get done at the same time. You first evaluate them. And we just opened the proposals just before school committee. And I have to remind myself because I just saw this.
They were quite different.
Fuss and O'Neill, their base price, $38,100. ECS base price, $50,065.50. So my recommendation would be both on price and on the strength of the proposal that we go for Fuss and O'Neill for the 3. One now in December, one in March, and one in June. So on that list that you had the 3, you know how you had 12/12, 3/13, and 6/13. It's those are the months in which they would be done.
Is there a motion on this?
I have a few
Michael,
questions,
go
if I
ahead.
could. This is the list of people that responded to the RFP, is what we have in our packet.
What you have in the packet, let's see what I
Yes, the cover sheet.
gave you. I'm pretty sure it's, yes, the 2 actual proposals that we opened up. And then what you have beyond that is all the people who asked for the RFP paperwork.
So this list is the RFP
The first,
requests, and then we had
who
2
requested
proposals.
yes, and we had 2 proposals.
And the 2 proposals, we have copies of here,
Right here.
and
Oh, well, I printed out just so you would see, so when, because we had them in the office, so if you wanted to look for them, you would see what they looked like.
right, and
if you want, I have
And
several
those were the only
copies.
two that came back?
It's interesting because Clean Harbor, I went back and forth with them. They had a few questions. I answered their questions on email, but they didn't put in a proposal.
Is there a motion to accept one of these?
I move we accept Fuss and O'Neill's proposal of 38,500.
100.
38,100.
Oh, 100, I'm sorry, I heard 5.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Discussion?
And that, once again, is for how many series of tests?
Just as 3 tests, it's 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, because we already did the September one.
So 12, 12.
12?
Three 13
Three
and
series tests.
6,
Yes.
13.
So, the only question I have is the, approximately $12,000 or so on, what have we paid for monitoring the past few quarters? Any idea?
It's similar. The difference, I think, in the two proposals, a lot of it was on the amount of time they thought would take. So, for example, inspection, labor, and reporting, one company had it at 6,000, the other one had it at 26. But when you take a look at the wipe analysis and the air samples, Fuzz and O'Neill were a little bit bigger. They were like 10 and 21. So those have been consistent. So it's about 10,000 every time we do these.
Well, my question was we've had so far a year's worth of testing.
When we do the quarterly testing,
Right.
not adding, whenever we get a spike in a room when we want to go test some more to try to figure out why. But when we do the quarterly testing, it is about 10 to 15, somewhere in there.
This proposal's 12 though, right?
12-7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that adding in a little fudge factor in case they have to come back and retest?
No, usually those are separate. This is just, what we give them is that list of, here's how many rooms you have in the building, how many wipe samples you would need per room, how many rooms would actually need air samples, multiply that by however many people you need to send down to actually set them up and take them down. That's usually how they calculate it.
Okay. Second. I don't know if it was second.
Yeah, Tony
did?
seconded it. Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's telling that only 2 companies, decided to even submit it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of a 1,500, I always do that, I click on the thing and as I'm reading it goes away. Approval of a $1,500 school scholarship from Mid-City Scrap for a Westport High School senior.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you again for
They have
that.
been very good to us.
Mhm. Approval of school committee calendar 2013.
November, quick question on that. November 17th is actually, what day was I
27.
looking at here?
November
November?
27th.
No, there's no 17th.
No. One of the dates we had, it looked like there was a conflict with a vacation in there somewhere.
Oh,
Where did I write it down at? The 27th. We have a meeting date on the 27th,
Which
and
month?
it's the
November.
start of
November.
Thanksgiving break.
wow, it's late.
I haven't actually looked at the calendar to see what it actually looks like in a
Well,
year
I'm
from now,
actually,
but
that's where I'm going.
But we have a meeting, our second meeting of the month will be on the 27th, and it's the start of Thanksgiving break.
Well, we could,
That's usually a half day.
We could have a buffet.
I didn't realize Thanksgiving was that late that year.
It was early this year, so we're making up
I'm
for
going
it.
to
Yeah, 'cause
see who
it's-
can do it quicker. You got the Google Chromes over there.
Oh, you want me to look a
Just
calendar?
Thanksgiving
If I ask Siri, she'll take me
2013.
right to the date, but it'd be kind of,
Yeah, the 13th, it's the 13th and the 27th, which,
Is that fifth grade?
yeah. Get that fifth grader over here.
Really?
it's because there's only 4 Thursdays, and it starts on a Friday for that month.
You want to have an extra meeting last Wednesday of
Oh.
January month?
Yeah, that does.
November is a popular month for us to do business, though. Just back it up a week.
Thought I said that you had to have the meeting on the October 30th.
Halloween?
You and your holidays, Eric, I mean, really.
Hey. It's tough to get out of the house,
Anyone
you know?
would think you had a lot of children,
Actually, I
huh?
wouldn't even be here, so that's fine. So you guys pick your days.
Yeah, that is unusual this year, or next year.
Well,
The
what
other thing we
prevents
can do is,
doing them back to back even, I mean, we
Nothing.
could do,
well, the other thing is, you
13th,
could,
The
you
13th
could
and the
skip the
20th.
27th, do the 13th,
And the 20th.
skip the 27th, and then in December, instead of doing one on the 11th, do one on the 4th and one on the 18th. Because that doesn't
That-
take us into
that's
Christmas.
fine. I
Yeah,
would
because
say
we're going to
that's
have to
fine,
not do the 25th as well,
right?
so.
Well, we hadn't even
we have
listed
to
it in
shift
there.
Just shift
anyway.
it up.
So if you want to do that, that would avoid both Thanksgiving and Christmas and still give you enough meetings. You're right, around this time of the year, you do need
It's
them.
So what, the
You need
6th
the
and the
meetings.
20th,
Yeah.
and then the 4th? Is that what you just?
So, but it'd be, in November would be on the
4th and the
13th,
18th.
and then in December it'd be the 4th and the 18th.
Sounds good.
And then we need to have a meeting on the 20th for whatever reason.
That's if we make it past the 21st this month.
Is that it? Any other?
Calendar.
Does that,
Good thing that he picked that up. I'm just
21.
looking.
There's all kinds of weird things happening the other day with the rain and thunder and the
15th,
lightning, so
that
it
falls
might
in
be
between.
coming.
It's called weather.
I hope so.
That's fine, that's fine.
Get my-
Is there any other
Get
changes?
my white Nikes.
All those in favor? Oh,
I need a, actually need a
sorry.
motion first. Motion
Is
to
there a
accept the
motion?
revised calendar of December 4th, deleting November 27th, and adding, that was just it.
The 4th and the
Adding
The
18th.
December 4th meeting.
4th and the 18th.
18th.
And, well, adding the 4th and, yeah, and the 18th.
I'm
would be
getting
the-
rid of the 11th.
Do you have that, Karen? Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on those changes? Any other problems?
How about changing to Tuesdays? I'm kidding.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Getting giddy, it's getting late. Carolyn. So,
Request for professional development? MASC?
Actually, this, now that this invoice has come in on December 5th, I can fill out the form that I received. And there's a second form I had a question about still, but that has to,
For which one, Mike? For MASC?
right, that's one you spoke of. This was the, when previously discussed, we talked about who may be attending, and I said I would be interested in going if no one else took up the opportunity. And so I will fill out that form, and it may make sense to take it up once I get the form to Dr. Colley filled out.
motion to table.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, it's on the agenda, so it's an action, we have to
Is there
table
a
it.
second?
Second?
I was gonna say, should Mike second that?
Second.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
NASBO? Mike?
Let's see if that invoice came in, because I have no idea. That came in. That's the same situation. I have not received, I have no idea the amount of it. It's a networking meeting. It has nothing to do with certification. It's not their training program. This is a networking meeting that, after having met the MASBO president, he encouraged me to attend some of those meetings, and in particular, this session, this day included a presentation on grants reform from the Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as, and what I was most interested in was the smart school budgeting. I've shared the publication that the Rainey Center has come out with just in October of this year. And so those were some of the issues that were on the agenda for that day. But I'm trying to see here if do we know if an invoice has come in yet for that?
No.
Because I registered without any idea what the cost would be. Originally thinking we were a member, and then it was clarified that it would be the non-member rate because Dr. Colley's a member, not the system.
Caroline?
I just have an issue with attending a training and then coming back here and asking us to pay for it. I think you need to come here first, ask for us to authorize and pay for it, and then attend the training. This is backwards. You went to a meeting on December 4th, you don't know how much it cost, and now you're asking us to pay for something that we never talked about you going to in advance. The same thing with the mass conference. There's a process, I understand, that we come, we ask, it gets voted on, it's a yay or a nay, and then we get the POs and attend. It's I'm gonna go, I pay, and then I come back and ask for you to pay me back. It doesn't make sense to me, I'm sorry.
Did you go on the 4th, Mike?
Which?
December 4th.
MASBO.
Yes. Maybe I wasn't clear. This has to do with process of not knowing what to fill in the forms, and the MASC, which is the Mass Association of School Committees that I've gone to quite often, I encouraged other members to attend. When I found out no one had planned to attend, I took advantage of that opportunity to learn more about being a member of a school committee, as I've done for 4 years. I see the invoices come in, and I'm happy to fill that form out, and I think...
Well, we tabled that one. This is the
Right,
next
but
one.
I'm responding to try to bring some clarity in the because it was just referenced by a previous speaker. The second issue is relatively the same. It was a session that I thought very pertinent to our budgetary procedures that we're trying going forward with this year. And let's see how much the cost is, and then I can fill the form out. So I think it may make sense to...
Motion to table.
Second.
I'll find out what happened to that invoice.
Discussion on tabling?
Yeah, did we, I
Tony
motioned.
seconded it.
Tony seconded. Discussion on it is, I know we've had talk back and forth whether we're gonna, I saw earlier on one of our pages, we have school committee's line item budget was 13,000 something. I know that's that's part of your salary and all this.
2,000.
No, actually it was 13,500. But that's encumbering some of her salary and other things. It's not our budget to just go have play money with. It's part of her salary for being our secretary. Did we eliminate the total line item of what our professional development would be?
No.
No, there's
That's
a,
the 2001, I think.
there's a
We
line
still have
item.
2,000 in there? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That was never touched.
I know we've talked about it, whether
Yeah.
we should be taking out of our own pockets, but You know, I do like the initiative of someone at least attending some of these meetings. I have taken advantage of myself and went up to Day at the Hill. All be said, we'll table it and we'll have that discussion when it needs to come up.
Carolina?
Yeah, I voted against in having that line item stay. I feel that we're cutting from the classrooms, we're cutting from the teachers, we cut supplies from the schools. For us to go to conferences on the school's dime, I think is inappropriate. So, and for us to be talking about paying for something after it happened, when the process is you come to this table first, we vote yes or no, and then we pay for it, I'm just astounded.
Actually, can I follow up on that? Usually the process is, honestly, it's been mentioned, I know Dr. Colley will say, or someone will hold up with some, the chair, whoever the chair may be at whatever particular meeting or whatever particular year it might be, would hold up and say, we just got a letter in from such and such of a conference, anyone interested in going? And it's not really an approval process, so it's a little bit gray on whether we approve something prior or after.
All right, all those in
Point of
favor?
information.
Yes, Michael.
If we're discussing MASPO,
Yes.
and that is the Mass Association of
Of
School
School
Business
Business
Officials
Officials. Mhm.
that have biannual meetings.
Bi-monthly.
Okay, bi-monthly meetings, and invited to that is school committee members. The waiting for the invoice on this first attendance, we'll know what it costs for the future, and it's not a conference. So let's not reference going to a conference when we're talking about a meeting. And it was a meeting. I guess that's the point of information.
Okay.
That you were voting
Thank
on
you.
attendance to a meeting.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, where are we at here?
Approval of the minutes of Wednesday, November 28th, 2012. Mm-mm.
I don't, if I can just, through the chair, only because I've seen something contradict that we've seen tonight when we had a line item for the sped supervisor of 75. Was there a dollar amount that we put on what it was gonna cost? I thought it was like, for some reason, 60,000 sticking in my head on what we were guesstimating what the salary of a sped supervisor would be.
You asked for the year's salary, and I said it would be between 60 and 75. 75 is what an assistant principal makes who works 11 months.
Okay. I just didn't see it in here, so I just wanted to.
Yeah, I remember that as well.
Obviously, the person wouldn't make that in half a year, but the annualized salary would be
I'm sorry, the
something
person
like that.
won't be making that?
What?
You just said the person won't be making that?
Not this year, because they would start in the middle of the year.
Okay, because we
It's
just
just
put
an
it down for our
annualized.
projection for next year, though. You put 75 for it.
It could be less
Okay.
if the person is,
Better safe
when I,
than sorry.
well, no, when I put budgets together, I kind of go, what would be the worst case scenario?
Okay.
But it's also only December through
Yeah.
whatever.
Right, for this year. Right.
A motion to
No,
approve. I'm sorry.
Well, do you want to have discussion after the motion?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Do you have
I'll wait
a
till
motion to approve
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Discussion, Michael?
Yes, I'm looking for the second point I had, but on second page at the top, I'd like to, the reason I don't think we should approve this, I believe it needs to be reviewed because I don't believe Dr. Colley indicated he was unaware that it was no longer on the website. I know he asked me who I had contacted, that if I had mentioned it to anyone.
I remember you being asked if you had mentioned it. Yes. And you said you had mentioned it to.
I'd just like to have the tape reviewed to see if Dr. Colley said he was unaware that it was no longer on the website. Because if he did, he received an email that indicated it wasn't on the website. He got a copy of what was sent to Beth Lewis. So I'll have an issue with that if in fact these are accurate. So step one is, let's make sure that's what he said. Because I don't know if we have a problem with emails getting around or what, but right now, if he was unaware that it was no longer on the website, is the comment that I want verified.
And that's in regards to the schematic of the,
No,
this
No,
is
the-
this paper.
yeah, the
little
of
colored
the rooms,
paper.
the little schematic
Yes.
of the rooms,
Yep,
high,
yep,
low,
yep.
green,
And,
red.
and the list of the rooms and what their levels
Okay.
were. Want to, when you're ready?
Is there any other discussion?
Yeah, there's one other area here that I had highlighted. And that was, Chair Duart informed Mr. Sullivan he had not received any emails from him in 2 weeks.
What page is that, Mike?
One,
B.
one,
B.
two, three.
B section.
The page.
I'm just wondering if that was mentioning no emails in reference to that issue.
Where exactly is it, Mike?
Third from the bottom.
Keep going.
Prior to the vote.
Okay. So what's your question?
Was whether or not your comment was 0 emails or no emails relative to the issue that was being discussed?
I think my reference was I had received no emails in the previous 2 weeks regarding that issue.
Okay, so we might want to add that in. That would be an edit then. Because I thought that's what it was.
No.
In the absence of the chair,
It
the emails were sent to
says
from the
that
chair.
she had not received any emails from him in 2 weeks.
Issue had been discussed.
Right, but it didn't say regarding that issue that I hadn't received any emails in 2 weeks. Sure. That was my intent, whether it was said that way
Yeah,
or not, I
that's what I
don't know.
thought. Those are the two I had noticed. So, maybe his comment was that he didn't recall receiving the copy of the email. If we can make that adjustment, then the minutes could go on file.
Yeah, I can tell you if I got a copy of that email, I didn't remember it because the next day I went back and I asked you, and we went looking, and sure enough, it wasn't on the website.
It was or wasn't?
Wasn't
It
on
was
the
not.
website.
So I'd had Karen go ahead and pull the old paper copies and then go back to Beth and say, Beth, what happened? So, no, if there was an email, I never remember seeing it.
So if that was the intent of his comment, just if he didn't, that's fine.
Okay.
Whatever has to be revised to reflect it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Correspondence, I don't have anything. There was nothing today, Karen? Okay. No?
Christmas mail is slowing down our mail, huh?
It must be.
No
New-
Christmas cards for us either, huh?
No Christmas
Wow.
cards.
Christmas presents.
No
sure.
holiday cards.
Christmas.
No.
I had a couple of Christmas cards.
I'm teasing. New business requests? Are there any comments and statements
fairs going on at the elementary school this week. If parents want to volunteer or just go buy some Christmas presents.
Spend some money.
Books. That's going
Holiday
on this
books?
week.
Huh?
Holiday books?
All
They
kinds
have
of-
adult books too there.
Yeah, no, they have,
There's
uh,
adult books as well, so. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of litigation, not to return to open session?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I, Eric Larrabee.
I, Michael Sullivan.
Aye.